across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yeah, welcome to the home of Common Sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow. So much to talk about this afternoon. We can't swerve Prince Andrew facing this huge police probe after allegedly asking his own police bodyguard for personal data on Virginia Giuffre. Now, this breaks all kinds of laws and rules, it should be said. The scandal, of course, has cost him royal titles and public appearances, with fresh scrutiny over his ties to the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Could this be the beginning of the end of the royal family? Serious question. Also this afternoon, a group of Labour police and crime commissioners have claimed migrants boost public finances by £341,000 each. Now, this is despite official figures which show the very opposite, and in fact, migrants cost the taxpayer much more than they ever pay in. Well, look at that aspect of the story. Meanwhile, it should be said as well, the government's deal with France is still failing. Just 42 illegal migrants have been returned, with thousands more coming in on arrival. We'll have more on those stories. And as you've been hearing, many major websites are still down after an Amazon Web Services outage hit global giants like Snapchat, Boohoo, Zoom and UK banks. Amazon says recovery is underway, but disruption to millions of users worldwide will continue for some time, all reliant on one cloud hub. What about that? 0344 499 1000. So here is the thing. Is this the beginning of the end of the royal family? If a government, look at it this way. Just think about this. If a government suggested, let's say we had no royal family, and a government suggested that tomorrow we were going to start a royal family, how would you vote? Would you vote for it? To start a royal family from scratch? We all know the answer. I can't imagine anyone would. How would you sell it? We're going to select a random family, give them billions of pounds, 7 palaces and castles. They'll live for free. They'll get first-class lifestyles forever. They'll holiday in the world's most luxurious locations, and then their kids will inherit the whole thing and it will start over again. They will want for nothing, ever. In exchange, they'll wave the flag for the country, press the flesh with a few world leaders, hold some banquets. Oh, and they'll get paid for all of this, by the way. No one would vote for that, would they? Nobody would. Look, and I understand there is, of course, a big history here, and it's central to the backstory of this country. It's huge, it's lengthy, and it's utterly fascinating. And it's also about tradition, and I should add, tradition is not a notion which should be dismissed just because it's unconventional. But the story of the British royal family is checkered. It's affected law, religion, even life and death. Once upon a time, of course, they ruled, they decreed, sometimes even turning on their own. Chopping off the head of a troublesome royal was pretty standard stuff. But in the modern era, they have rightly lost those kind of influences and are now largely symbolic. But it's harder and harder to support their existence, much like the TV licence in that respect, actually. And we all know what we should do with that. This weekend, of course, we saw more revelations about the horrendous creature that is Prince Andrew. What a wrong 'un he is and always has been, frankly. The king has sort of half fired him from his remaining regal status, but he's still a prince. Of course, this was the absolute definition, this man. He was the epitome of the old-fashioned royal who believed their birthright brought them an impenetrable status and immunity from any kind of hassle or jip. And let's be honest, he's been up to his neck in it for years. The Epstein stuff is no surprise. Even his former wife, Fergie, was in on the act. Epstein was a squillionaire and therefore their kind of person. The fact that he was a child abuser on an industrial scale was of no relevance to them whatsoever. After all, history of the royal family hardly shows that morality and decency has been at the forefront of royal life. Now, King Charles has sort of stepped in, but the taste that is left is not good. And if you look at King Charles himself, and let's be brutally honest here, look, I know he's been through it and he's still getting over his cancer diagnosis, but he's never really been able to command or even equal the respect that his mother had. Queen Elizabeth was a class act, and when she died, that royal pie chart of popularity took a hit. So here we are in one of the most grubby chapters in recent royal history, and let's be honest, there's been a good few. Prince Andrew, I wonder, is he the catalyst? Is this the beginning of the end? Look, it's not going to happen in our lifetime, is it? They slim it down a little bit. But it's very, very hard, despite the fact that you might love elements of the royal family. When the Jubilee was on, and I've seen a couple of them, Queen Elizabeth Jubilees, you can think whatever you like about democracy, and you wouldn't invent a royal family tomorrow, and if somebody did, you wouldn't vote for it, and everything I've just said. You can think about all of that, and then suddenly the Queen is on a flotilla going down the Thames. Madness are on the balcony that's lit up like a Union flag, singing songs. You've got every big leader from the world in attendance, horses galloping down the Mall. And when that happens, you couldn't fire me up anymore if you plugged me into a flipping socket. I mean, this is incredible stuff. It's the pomp, the ceremony. When Trump came over, the way we can lay that on, the regal backdrop, is kind of crucial to all of that. But ultimately, can you really justify it? And when you look at this chapter with Prince Andrew, my sense is that it goes way beyond just Prince Andrew. OK, you can bring Fergie. I mean, they even took his kids to see the child molester as well, for God's sake. I mean, what is wrong with these people? But it's not just about him. It's kind of symbolic of the rot that has set into so many tentacles of the royal system, if you like. It's not personal to Charles or Camilla or to William or Harry, but there is a rot in the system, and it's inevitable that once in a while you're going to have these moments. And I look at Andrew, and I mean, Epstein's just one of the many curious characters this fella's hung out with over the years. And that's just fine by him, because he's royal. And I genuinely think everything you read about Prince Andrew will kind of tell you that there is a self-belief that it's his God-given right to be in that position. He believes he is better than you, because he's royal. The fact that it was just a birth accident, if you want to look at it that way, is lost. I mean, these people roll like this, and there are many of them scattered around in the kind of branches of the royal family when you start looking at the trees and the cousins and all the other aspects of it. I mean, it's kind of extraordinary. I don't dispute that some of them work very hard. Princess Anne there's hardly a day when she's not doing something, planting a tree, visiting an organisation of some kind. That stuff carries weight, you know, for charities. That bit I think we all understand. But when you look at what is happening with Prince Andrew, as he still is, should we just call him Andrew, really, frankly? And he's been called many things over the years. When you look at that, and you look at the kind of the king's position as head of state, and whilst he seems like an all-right kind of bloke, I'd imagine it's probably a bit tricky to work for, but you sort of wonder, you know, did our kind of royal thing die when Queen Elizabeth II left us? Is this the beginning of the end for the royal family? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. The journalist and Sun columnist Dave Wooding is back with us. Dave, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Always good to have you with us. I mean, this story just keeps on. I mean, almost by the day it is mounting. We know that he's now under police investigation for this allegation he requested personal data from on Virginia Giuffre, which breaches all kinds of rules and regulations, particularly if it was acted on by the police officer. This, of course, has cost him his titles. He's still a prince, but there's quite a lot going on there that, you know, he's never going to be opening a garden centre near you anytime soon, this fella. But, of course, it's forced him out of royal life, essentially. His links to Epstein continue to draw a lot of scrutiny. Let's have a reminder of what he said on that now infamous Newsnight interview.
Forward.
Yeah, and that, Dave, doesn't seem to be ringing quite true at the moment.
No, and just looking at that clip, Ian, it reminds us that interview was given 6 years ago. So this scandal has been dragging on for a decade almost, and he's been hanging around like a bad smell of the royal family. And it's not surprising that the king has finally reached the end of his tether and thought, you've just got to go. I can remember sitting in the editor's chair week in, week out. Photographers would come up with a picture of Prince Andrew today, and I remember saying, well, what's the relevance of this picture? And they just say, well, it's Andrew and it's what he's doing. He's in trouble. And the focus on him was just incredible. Yeah. And that's because, well, we know now, 6 years on, that what he said in that interview were all mistruths. And the King rightly has said enough is enough. It's intolerable, I think was the word that was used here. Yeah. And either he went through a parliament, which was the difficult way of doing it, or he had to step down voluntarily. And I think it was, jump before you're pushed. Yeah,
I think so. But it throws up the kind of wider question of royal relevance in so many respects. I think King Charles is a hard-working man. He's, been through his own health issues recently. I don't dispute that if you become the king, as opulent, as extravagant as it all sounds, you get, who else gets a crown and a throne? Apart from when, you were in Fleet Street, Dave, you were revered in that kind of way, I seem to remember. But nonetheless, I'm sure there's a lot of pressures that come with the job. Today he's in Manchester. But there is that sense that since the Queen died, the whole royal thing doesn't quite seem to have the same comfortable fit that it did do.
Well, yes, Queen Elizabeth II was a massive figurehead. She was there through all our lives. She was the glue which held the royal family together. Yeah. And in fact, when we've had other crises in the royal family. Let's not forget the divorce of then Prince Charles and Princess Diana of Wales. And we've had, Andrew and Fergie, their breakup. We've had all sorts of things going wrong. In the annus horribilis, remember? But the Queen always seemed to keep it together, and she clearly ruled that lot with an iron rod. And now she's gone, it's all unravelling a little bit, and you can't help but feel a little sorry for King Charles. He waited so long to accede to the throne, and now he's got there. He's inherited a right old mess. You know what? It's a bit like when Alex Ferguson left Man United. They were winning everything. They were the top club, and then when he went, it just all went pear-shaped. Yeah,
I'm surprised you would mention Man United on a weekend like this, Dave. That was very brave of you, wasn't it? Let's talk about Harry Maguire. No, let's not do that. We'll come back to that story, of course. Let's talk about Labour and police commissioners, crime commissioners, publishing this curious pro-immigration fact sheet, Dave. This is three Labour police and crime commissioners. They've published a leaflet claiming that migrants contribute £341,000 each to public finances over their lifetime. This is such a muddled analysis of what they're... I'm pretty sure that if you look for the top brain surgeon or top IT consultant who came to this country from Australia or Pakistan or Canada, wherever, then you would be able to collate a figure such as that. The average Joe sailing over the channel who's not speaking much English and is invariably going to go, if at all, into a low-skilled profession, probably driving for a moody taxi company, minicab company, I don't imagine that figure could be applied to those people.
No, this seems to be an overzealous spin operation by the police and crime commissioners of Durham, Northumbria and Cleveland, who've teamed up with an organisation called the Northeast Migrant Party or something. Yeah. It's a migrant group, pro-migrant group. And they've come up with these figures saying that between the ages of 25 and 80, a migrant puts 350,000 or just under that into the economy. Well, this figure, OK, where did they get this figure from, one might ask, and we could probably read the report in full and see how they work out their maths. But similarly, the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, the more respected government watchdog on finances, says that between that age and retirement age, the average migrant takes £150,000 out of the economy. So the two figures completely clash. And again, they seem to be saying migrants are good for Britain. We don't have any problem with migrants, most of us. They keep getting this message wrong, Ian. They keep thinking that we're all against migration. We're not against migration. We're against uncontrolled migration and we're against illegal migration.
100%.
And the biggest migration that people are concerned about is the illegal migration, people arriving on boats. They keep going on about crime as well in this report, saying that, you know, only 12% of crime is committed by, 12% of those who commit crime are migrants. And that is the number of people who live in this country. So it's all proportionate. But hey, when you start looking at the illegal migrants who come over on boats, you've had 425 offences, including 4 rapes, 44 sexual assaults, and over 100 violent offences from these people. So it's not quite as simple as they're making out. And nobody's against migrants. Again, I'll reiterate that. It's illegal migration, people who cheat the system. We're not against asylum. We're against asylum cheats. And we want our migration control so we know who's coming in and going out.
And that's a fairly, I would say, a fairly intelligent way that a modern-day country would deal with this issue. And, you know, as you say, illegal migration, that's a whole other ballgame. But, of course, there's lots of it. And that's not really factored into these curious stats. You do hear them. I've heard Sadiq Khan actually parrot that same line before as well, Dave.
Yes. Well, I think what the pro-migrant groups seem to do is attack the wrong issue. Nobody's against migration. They seem to say, well, you're all against migration. We need migrants to come and work in the NHS, etc. Yes, we do. And we take them in and we don't object to the migrants coming in to work in the NHS or anywhere else. What we object to is people cheating the system and the government having no grip on the issue.
That's 100% correct. Listen, Dave, stay with us. We'll be back with more stories. Dave Wooding is with us, columnist at The Sun, Westminster journalist of decades of experience, knows his way around the political bloc more than almost any other. We'll talk more to Dave in a moment. Over to you as well, 0344 499 1000. Just on that point of royalty, we've got loads of subjects up and running here. I'd love to get your take, by the way, on the migrant story that the Labour crime commissioners have come up with, that the average migrant contributes £341,000 each to public finances over their lifetime, a figure that is odds, by the way, with the official OBR report on that. Thoughts on that and on the royal side of things? You look at Prince Andrew, what is going on in the royal family? We've had Harry walking the plank over the last few years. Is this the beginning of the end of the royal family? Serious question. 0344 499 1000.
There is an organisation called the Centre for Media Monitoring, which grew out of the Muslim Council of Britain, and it is there supposedly to monitor the media and to identify examples of alleged Islamophobia in reporting. And they've claimed things like the news reports that Salman Abedi, who attacked the Manchester Arena, chanted Islamic slogans before detonating his device, that those reports are Islamophobic for saying that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. This comes from Chris from Ottershaw, who says, afternoon, Ian, the royal family needs a reset after the behaviour of Andrew and Harry, and I think that Prince William and Princess Catherine and the kids are well placed to do that. I don't want for the royal institution to disappear yet. And it is the question that gets thrown up, isn't it? And equally, and I understand this, another message came in from Lady J, who says, leave our royal family alone. I'd rather have a king than President Starmer any day. Oh, you put it like that, you're not absolutely wrong. Dave Wooding is with us, the journalist, columnist at The Sun. Let's look at this story then, Dave. Sadiq Khan facing accusations of a grooming gang cover-up after reports emerged of young girls being raped in London hotels, despite his public denials. It's worth having a reminder here of when the leader of the Conservatives in the London Assembly pulled the London Mayor up on the grooming gang situation. Here's Susan Hall.
I asked you this question last week and you found every which way but not to answer it. Just how many grooming gangs have we got in London?
To avoid any misunderstanding, can she define what she means by that?
Yes, if you look at what's gone on in Rotherham, where there are people taking young girls, grooming them for sex, that is what I'm talking about.
We know in London there are issues about exploitation of young people, but they're not as defined by the member in her definition of what those types of gangs are.
So are you saying we haven't got the same sort of gangs that are in Rotherham, Bradford and lots of other places in the country?
Just for you misunderstanding, what does she mean by that?
You know full well what I mean by that. It's all over the television. You know exactly what I mean by that. These gangs of people that are grooming young girls for sex. Do we actually have those in London?
I'm unclear, Chair, what is meant by the question. If you could spell it out, I can answer.
I've just spelt it out. Are you not listening? It's the sort of gangs that groom young girls at a young age for sex. Exactly how much clearer do you want me to be?
Quite obvious, Dave, what Mr. Khan was trying to get her to say in that clip and failed. But there appears to be, certainly accusations of denial, if not cover-up, going on.
Yes, it's clear that Sadiq Khan there, not brushing under the carpet, but he didn't want to admit to anything similar to what was going on in Rochdale. But what's happened now is it's been revealed that there were 4 Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary reports between the years of 2016 and 2025, which suggested there are, in 4 of those reports, it suggested that there were 6 potential victims, young girls who were victims of grooming gangs. Now, this has been uncovered by a journalist going through all the reports and deep reading all the small print. Now, of course, this is quite embarrassing for Sadiq Khan, because in view of that abject denial and in fact, playing around with words there, it's clear that there is a problem somewhere and that the authorities haven't really reacted to it. And it's much easier to deal with these problems when you accept there is a problem and you get stuck into it and solve it.
Yeah. And again, we're awaiting the start of this grooming gang inquiry. I don't know what the heck has gone on there, but there's all sorts of question marks around that. We will wait and see. We're told that in the next couple of weeks there will be some movement in this department. Well, you certainly hope so, because there are victims out there that need at least some form of justice or recognition of the wrongdoings from areas and institutions that should have known better. Let's move to this curious story from Kent County. County Council, Dave, leaked footage of the council leader there, Linden Kemkaren, telling colleagues to suck it up. I think other language was used over budget rows. It's exposed tensions, we are told, in Reform UK's flagship council. Let's have a listen to what was said.
I like to hear what everybody thinks. However, when it comes to making the really big decisions, and I'm afraid LGR is one of those really big decisions, sometimes I will make a decision that might not be liked by everybody in the group. But I'm afraid you're just going to have to suck it up, OK?
Well, she doesn't mince her words, Dave.
That's ruling with an iron rod, for sure.
Yeah.
This is slightly embarrassing for a Reform Party, because Kent County Council was seen as the flagship council, and they set up a Doge unit, Department of Government Efficiency, like the one in the USA, to try and cut the overheads there. And they were criticising the previous Conservative administration for raising council tax by 5% every year. And it looks now like they're in charge, that Reform are going to have to do the same, which is quite an embarrassment. And I think what's happened there is, in that video, feelings have got a little bit, temperatures have got a little bit high, and there's been a bit of argument going on. I don't think the actual video is that damaging.
No, it's not really. It's what a lot of council meetings look like.
Yeah, if you're sitting behind closed doors having a heated discussion, that's what happens.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was on a Zoom call and somebody has leaked it to a left-leaning newspaper shows that there is dissent in the ranks. 4 of them have now been suspended, which isn't a good look at all. It shows this is how the Reform run a council. What will it be like if they run a government?
And that's clearly what she says herself. Nigel knows we are a shop window. And that's very true, because Kent is, I think, the biggest authority, county council authority in the country. It's absolutely huge. Multitude of problems, as all these councils have, with huge debt issues. They're trying to save money. But as you rightly say there, Dave, the issue here isn't the fact that she swore at a meeting or it got a bit animated, a bit tasty in parts. It's the fact that one of their own appears to have leaked it.
Yeah, and it shows a few other things, Ian. What it shows is, can Reform instill discipline in its members if it gets into government?
Yeah.
Clearly in a local council there, they do not have the discipline. And if they get into government, secondly, they've got to have 650 candidates. How are they going to get the quality to find those candidates? That's a question people have been asking quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, can they, when they get into power, if they get into power, will we have the same sort of thing? But to be honest, Ian, I don't think people are that concerned about this. They're fed up with the Labour Party after only 15 months.
Yep.
They had 14 years with the Conservative Party and feel that they failed. And people are willing to give Reform a chance. But we've got 4 years to the next election. So if we get the drip of stuff like this, and we get the scrutinising of their policies, it might get a little bit more difficult for them as we get nearer to the election.
Yeah, and it's certainly not going to be a straight road for Reform.
No.
And I think at the top they kind of know that. But we'll watch with interest what happens to these 4 suspended Reform councillors and where this story goes next. But meantime, Dave, always great to have you on. Thank you for your time. Dave Wooding, he is, of course, columnist at The Sun, political journalist of some note as well. Thank you to him. Over to you. Brian says, please stop saying the Royals work hard. They don't. Photo shoots, cutting a ribbon or the curtains on a plaque is not hard. Sitting at a luxury dinner for charities is not hard work. Waving at the crowd, collecting bouquets of flowers is not hard. Visiting kids in hospital is not hard work. Let's just keep it real. Plumbers, bricklayers, mechanics and waitresses work hard. That is true. If you compare it to digging holes, then there's quite a lot of us that don't work hard in that respect. I would say that it's full on. It's not hard work in the conventional sense. If you're doing 250 engagements a year, then you are on a bit of a non-stop kind of roll of speeches and visits and getting it right and all the rest of it. So it's, yeah, maybe full on is the better way to put it. But, in exchange for some castles, the odd palace, and always a free ticket to a hammock in Barbados, yeah, it's certainly not digging holes for a living. 0344 499 1000. Is it the beginning of the end of the royal family after this latest chapter with Prince Andrew? There's been loads over the years, of course, and we know what happened with Harry when he essentially bawled his eyes out and legged it for the hills. We know that story. But prior to that, there's been others. The big divorce, Charles, Diana, back in the day. Look at how that... look at the perception there was of Prince Charles as he was then, back then. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Don't be missing Petrie tonight, 11 on Talk. You heard what the man said. Back with your calls in just a second. This is from Matt in Saddleworth, who says, I wanted to flag an issue I see as an existential threat to the monarchy, their shifting political centre of gravity. The monarchy's strength historically relied on the deep allegiance of centre-right voters. However, as certain royals increasingly champion causes associated with the political left, that centre-right support clearly shows signs of strain. The irony is that this outreach to the left is fundamentally flawed, and the institutional left has a core Republican impulse and will never truly be satisfied until the monarchy is abolished. The royals are pursuing an alliance with those who want them gone, while simultaneously losing the loyalty of those who historically defended them, essentially sawing off the branch they're sitting on. Very well. I love that last line. There is a bit of that going on, isn't there? I mean, there was a time when I thought the King was a presenter of Countryfile. He was on it so often, chopping down his bushes and pruning his bits and pieces. I thought, yeah, he's signed up for this, and we know he's big on those kind of issues. I think Prince, what's the other fella called? The one with no hair, William, Prince William, him. I think That wasn't very kind, was it? I think he is kind of equally signed up to those very issues that Matt is referring to there. Let's speak with Alex O'Connor, YouTuber and host of the Within Reason podcast. Good afternoon to you, Alex. Nice to have you with us.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me.
Bit of a rubbish day to be Prince Andrew, and it's worth noting he's still a prince.
Yes, and in fact still technically has the royal titles that he's chosen to give up unless Parliament want to get involved, which I think would be probably more hassle than it's worth. But, you know, nice of him to step down voluntarily. It sort of reminds me of how the king voluntarily pays income tax, even though he doesn't technically have to. You know, it's a good sign of character, perhaps.
Yes, it's very nice that somebody chooses to do that. But of course, you know, it's a curious. I said at the very beginning of the programme, if we didn't have a royal family and somebody invented one tomorrow, would anyone vote for it? And I don't think anybody would vote for it, would they? If you look at the kind of bullet points of kind of what you get for the gig and what you have to give in return, I don't think any member of the taxpaying public would go, well, that's a good idea. Let's take a random family and just give them loads of stuff.
Of course not, and people don't vote for them even now is the key point. But no, of course, it's a ludicrous suggestion to think that if this were invented today, anybody would think it a good idea. Which is why the royal family serves as nothing but a vestige of how government used to work, and we prop it up as a kind of taxidermy, a sort of sentimental taxidermy of a way of life that once made sense, but unfortunately doesn't anymore. And that's without the recent scandals of the family politics of
100%.
Megxit or the certain Duke of York and his, you know, being an alleged fellow hobbyist of convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. It's
Indeed.
all the more troubling.
I said earlier, it's the royal family are a bit like the TV licence, aren't they? I mean, you can't. It's very hard to justify its existence anymore, and you might have a sort of romantic link to it, and that is almost the only one I can really come up with. And I understand, you know, I know the notion of tradition is kind of, in its basic form, quite intellectually irrational. However, you know, there's lots of things that are traditional that don't necessarily make sense. It doesn't make sense you spend 50,000 quid on buying a wedding dress and walking up the aisle in a church, but it's a tradition and people love it, and there's all sorts of stuff. And there is a bit of me on this one, Alex, that thinks, you know, I wouldn't vote for this idea of a royal family, but then when I see some big royal event and, you know, horses galloping down the Mall and the flags out and the bands playing and the opulence of the palaces, there's a bit of me that's fired up by that. Do you think that's the trick of the royal family?
That is the trick, but I think it's worthwhile calling it a trick. I mean, there's no reason why we can't have such, you know, grandiose state occasions for elected officials, although I understand that would sort of lose a bit of the oomph. But the question you have to ask, of course, is, you know, whenever I talk about the abolition of the monarchy, people say, well, would you really prefer a King Boris, a King Starmer, a King Truss? Can you imagine? Yeah. And I think, well, we've benefited from, at least for the majority of my lifetime, a woman who's done a perfectly good job being the head of state in that she didn't really say very much. King Charles is doing a similar kind of thing. But when people say to me, well, would you really want a King Boris? I think, well, what if we had a King Andrew? He's still 8th in line to the throne. Not only that, but when an MP is sworn into Parliament, they can swear if they like on a Bible, on a Quran, on a book of law. They could probably swear in on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets if they made an argument strongly enough. But they must swear allegiance to not only the king, but also his heirs and successors, unseen. We don't know who they're going to be. So every member of Parliament who's currently sat in the House of Commons has already sworn allegiance to King Andrew, should that ever come to be. They've already done it unseen. In fact, to the extent that Clive Lewis, when he swore in, he swore allegiance to King, but forgot to say heirs and successors. And you know what? They made him do it again. Yes, so right. If this man who is 8th in line to the throne becomes the king, then it would literally be treasonous for any of our MPs to try to do anything about it, because unseen, prior to the facts, a priori, they have already sworn allegiance to this man. That is the problem of monarchy.
No, I agree. Those that passionately support the idea of monarchy. I mean, there are people who just like the kind of royal mugs at a jubilee and the flags and all of that. I kind of almost buy into it in a kind of showbiz sort of way. But others do not unreasonably argue that there is a curious, again, it comes back to sort of historic tradition, etc., but it kind of shouldn't work, but it does. And its greatest strength is that it's not particularly political, despite sort of allegiances and phrases and nods of getting laws through that have to happen that they would never be argued against. So it's a great way, bizarre as it is, of doing business. It's a kind of win-win for those that support it.
Yeah, but it also makes it a bit of a farce. And I think that it depends on the context you're speaking in as to how important and political it is. I mean, one criticism I've often made is that if I try to point out that the monarchy is essentially a redundant institution that's still costing a lot of money. Yeah. And by the way, when you hear this stuff about £12 million being paid in settlement, that's about $16 million to Virginia, to the victim or the victim's family now, I suppose. Yes. It kind of makes a bit of a farce of the idea that, well, don't you think that the royal family bring in a lot of sort of tourism money to the country? It's like, are we serious right now? We're talking about the head of state. We're talking about the man who claims by birthright to rule over his subjects. That's you and me, to the extent that we have to incessantly refer to his Majesty and Highness. I like to remind people that Highness is a relative term. Higher than what? Higher than who? And on what grounds? And that this is something which would automatically be conferred onto a man like Andrew if he just so happened to be in line for the throne. You're right. Like it's a sentimental tradition, and it works when it works, but it doesn't when it doesn't. So when I remind people that this is redundant and should be done away with, they say to me, well, you have to understand, Alex, like they don't really have that much political power. You know, they're not really doing anything that's that important anymore, so you don't need to worry about it. And then I say, well, then what's the point in having them in the first place? And I'm told that they're somehow integral to the upkeep of our political system. You can't have it both ways.
Indeed, you can't, and that's what it is, a sort of curious conundrum in that respect. We were talking in the office, Alex, before the show about the if you were to get rid of it. I would imagine there'd be quite a lot of, Brexit was tricky, rightly or wrongly, but it was tricky, and this would be, there'd be potential similar hurdles and bureaucracy surrounding this, would there not?
I'm not so sure. I mean, if the monarchy suppose that the monarchy were to rid itself of its official powers, it no longer does the king have to sign off on laws before they pass into Parliament. No longer is the king exempt from hereditary taxes. No longer any of this stuff. It just goes away. That could have happened 5 hours ago. Would you have even noticed? Would there even be a difference? Our government already functions efficiently and well, not so efficiently and effectively, but I mean to say as efficiently and effectively as it would do, were it not for this sort of strange man in a throne who claims to be in charge of the whole affair, but anytime anything remotely scandalous comes up, just backs off and says, well, I don't really like to get involved with politics. Okay, why don't we continue that trend? I quite like the idea of them not being involved in politics, but why not go the whole hog? If that's what makes the monarchy so good and harmless in this country, that they don't get involved, then why don't they just go away altogether? And don't get me wrong, I don't mind these people. I'm sure they're perfectly nice. I've never met a member of the royal family. Funnily enough, I've never been invited to Buckingham Palace.
Outrageous.
And I must say that I am glad that £12 million has gone to. I'd rather it be with Virginia Giuffre or now her family.
Well, I get that.
Than with the monarchy, but where has that money come from, ladies and gentlemen?
If a knighthood came your way, though, Alex, I mean, you surely couldn't resist the chance to get over there to the palace and have the royal sword dropped onto each of your shoulders, and you walk away, Sir Alex O'Connor. I mean, imagine that in your local of an evening. As you walked in. Go on, what would you do?
I'll tell you exactly what I would do. I would do the same thing that self-same Clive Lewis did when he was sworn in as an MP, when he sandwiched this necessary affirmation between saying, I take this oath under protest, and this is not where my true allegiance lies, and I hope one day the people will not be subject to such a king. He then, after saying this treasonous speech, swears his allegiance, which we know he's now doing falsely. And in the face of this treason, in the face of this direct treason, it's as if you were getting married. And before your vows, you said, now listen, I do plan to divorce you, darling, one day. But just now and under protest, I'll say, yes, I do. Yeah. After this happens, what does his Majesty's royal clerk, who is participating in this ceremony and swearing in this man, what does he say in the face of this treason? Thank you very much. Take your seat. I would like to know if they would have the same kind of lukewarm, limp response if I did the same thing with the sword upon my neck, if I told them, you know what, I think that this is all a load of nonsense, but if you want to give me a title, I'll take it. But maybe I'd wait until they'd lifted up the sword before I said
that. But would you be able to do... I'm trying to think who it was, somebody quite famous who went to the palace and was determined to show a kind of sort of stoical look of nonchalance on meeting the Queen, and he said, you know, I'm not going to do any of the bowing and any of that stuff, you know. And the minute she walked out the car or the room and shook his hands, his legs went to jelly, nearly dropped to the floor. He couldn't believe that he was in the presence of not specifically that human being, but what it all stood for. And much in the same way, when we bow in a courtroom, we're not bowing to Judge Smithers, we're bowing to the kind of institution. That's really what many would argue, that it's, you know, we've got to take individuals out of this. I know that's hard to do, and it's the institution. And if Clive Lewis, of all people, whatever he thinks, often the rule of thumb is to think the opposite.
Yes, well, you know, maybe it is the case that when I got to meet His Royal Majesty, if we must insist on my calling him that, that I was reminded of the institution which he represented. But I don't think that my legs would turn to jelly when thinking of hereditary dynasties that claim a right to rule over subjects by right of blood. I don't think that sort of inspires the same kind of reverence in me that perhaps it did to the famous celebrity that you're speaking of who visited the palace that one time. For me, I would be a little more inclined to stand up straight on a reminder of what these are. I'm sure the people themselves are nice enough. I might think, well, what a pleasure to meet you. But when I remember, as that person did, what these people represent, I think my back would be straight back up again.
Well, we might see this in action one day, Alex. Who knows? I was going to finish this. I was going to finish this by us both singing the national anthem, but
God save the king. Well, you know, nobody else is going to at this point, so I think maybe that's for the best.
I think we've got this.
God save the king, neither of which I believe in.
Alex, great to have you on, sir. Thank you. Alex O'Connor, YouTuber and host of the Within Reason podcast. Check it out. He's clearly not a royalist. Do you agree with him? Could we do without it? Is it the beginning, the end of the royal family? 0344 499 1000.
There is an organisation called the Centre for Media Monitoring, which grew out of the Muslim Council of Britain, and it is there supposedly to monitor the media and to identify examples of alleged Islamophobia in reporting. And they've claimed things like the news reports that Salman Abedi, who attacked the Manchester Arena, chanted Islamic slogans before detonating his device, that those reports are Islamophobic for saying that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. John says, John's in Lancaster, says the armed forces swear allegiance to the King. This stops any mad, corrupt politician using the forces against the people. Good point. Joanna in Salisbury, that was pretty mean of you to say Prince William has no hair. He has lots of hair. It's just slid to his face. That's true. It was like a transplant on his own top bit. I think that's what happened. Let's go to Carl in Liverpool. How are you doing, Carl?
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. What are your thoughts on this? Is this the beginning of the end of the royal family?
Well, I think it's the end of Andrew.
Yeah.
I think my idea would be, or not so much a suggestion, but maybe William said something about modernising it. But I would be advocating for Charles to step aside and Camilla and bring William and Kate as the king and queen and Starfish. He's too old, Charles. He waited such a long time to get that position, you know, and at the age he's got it, he's been sick, he's recovering. I think it's taken a lot out of him. He should step aside. And, you know, earlier on you mentioned he is a little bit left-wing. He has gone a little bit left, and I'd rather him be centred than anything, you know, and not have a view.
Gone a bit Degsy on us. I mean, I wonder if there's a happy medium there, because you mentioned, you know, William and Kate. But do you remember, Carl, before Harry went nuts and Meghan first came on the scene, we all thought, wow, this is going to be the future of the royal family. You got two people, you know, they look good on camera, they can make it, they seem a bit more accessible. This is going to be the TikTok royal family. They're going to really make this work. And then it all went, well, pear-shaped, to put it politely.
Yeah, it would have been nice if Harry wouldn't have lost his marbles and Meghan wouldn't have been so outspoken and kind of, you know, I think she's gone complete opposite. But I think the royal family, I heard you earlier, you know, that gentleman earlier, Alex, saying, you know, about the royal family bringing in money. Yes, they do bring in, and it does cost a lot for those homes they live in, etc., and whatever else we pay for. But I like the pomp and circumstance. I like that side of it. You know, that's what makes us Great Britain, the royal family. I think if we lost it, then, you know,
and that's always been my point, Carl. Even though we all know it's irrational, right? The whole idea of having this one family. We know but it's not really about the individual. It's about what it stands for, and it kind of sort of bizarrely works, even though you wouldn't invent it tomorrow. Yeah, it does. Well, you see when we have the celebrations of, you know, the Jubilees, it's 100%. Yeah, people go absolutely bonkers for it because we do love the royal family. But you said something earlier about would we do it now and put someone like King Boris in. I don't think if you give the people the choice, 99.9 would say no, given how much it costs the taxpayers, etc. But I think we, as a tradition, you know, it's always known, I think, and we should keep it. And the poor Queen, I can't imagine what she's thinking. You know, what she would think now if she was still with us with everything that is going on and her boy leaning left. It's Charlie the socialist. Carl, brilliant stuff. Thank you. Really nice to talk as well. And of course, Prince Andrew, I think, was the Queen's favourite son. I think I'm right in saying. Which is, and also I understand that, and I didn't know this until I think it was Julia mentioned it earlier, that Charles and Andrew aren't great mates by any means. There's no love lost there. Kevin is in Dorset. What have you got for us, Kevin? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Normally, Ian, I always agree with pretty much anything that comes out of talkTV. Mm-hmm. On this one, I'm a little bit more, I'm pro-royal. Mm-hmm. But for good reason. It isn't. This is a very complicated. It's not just should we have a royal family? Andrew's been a naughty boy, or not a naughty boy, horrendously bad, and he needs being. No, you're out. You're gone. He doesn't represent the morals of the royal family, doesn't represent the morals of the country. So, yes, totally agree with that. He should be gone.
Sure.
But as regards the royal family and taxing and what they cost us and everything else, I watched a whole documentary on this quite a few times because it bugged me over the years.
Sure.
Even though I was royal. I've met Prince Charles and I've met one of the other dignitaries as well in the past. And there's more to it than meets the eye. The symbolic king and royal family, queen royal family, brings in a huge amount of foreign money in visitors, holidays, people coming to the country to see all what it's about. If you quite rightly said tomorrow, could we do King Boris or somebody else or pick somebody? No, of course nobody's going to go for that because that's like saying you and me being king or somebody else being queen.
Don't knock it, Kevin.
It doesn't work that way. Sorry?
Don't knock it. I think I could do a good job over there with the...
No, to be honest with you, no, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want it because you are talking 24/7 hours a day, the hours these people work. It is far above all what we ever could achieve ourselves. And whilst you get weighted on hand, foot and finger, you don't live your life. You're told what to do. You've got top security. You can't be a free person. We need to respect the people who actually deliver this to us.
All right, on that point, I've got to cut in, Kevin, because the news is upon us. Great point, though, and that is the view, I think, of a lot of people. I don't not share that view either, by the way, but I am musing the question, particularly with Andrew and Harry before him and a few other bits and pieces that have gone wrong along the way. It does force you into that. It should do in a democracy. We should ask this question from time to time. Is it the beginning and the end of the royal family? More from you on the way right now. News, 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're going to be right back on it in a couple of moments' time. Loads to get through. Here we are, of course, talking about Prince Andrew facing a police probe after allegedly asking his police bodyguard for personal data on Virginia Giuffre. Now, this breaks all kinds of laws and rules if it turns out to be true. The scandal, of course, has cost him some royal titles, but he is still a prince, doesn't make public appearances anymore, and there's fresh scrutiny over his ties to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. It's a pretty bad day at Buck House at the moment. Could this be the beginning of the end of the royal family? We'll take more calls and comments on that. Also this afternoon, Donald Trump has reportedly demanded Ukraine accept Putin's peace terms or face destruction. We understand he was shouting at Zelensky during White House talks and pushing for Kyiv to surrender. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? Because Trump just kind of goes, depending on the day of the week. A couple of weeks ago, he wasn't that struck on Putin, and Zelensky was his best mate. It's gone the other way again now. And Ed Miliband hints VAT could be scrapped on energy bills but won't commit to action before 2030 as energy costs soar. Meanwhile, Labour has promised 400,000 clean energy jobs and 2.5 million for training. Of all the stories in over 20 years of doing this job that I simply don't believe, this is one of them. There's going to be just shy of 500,000 green jobs created. I'm not buying into that. I reckon a big chunk of them would be taxpayer, sort of civil servant-y type jobs, and the rest would be unloading solar panels from a plane from China. We'll watch with interest. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Trevor in Derbyshire says, let's make a start by getting rid of the dirge that is the national anthem. Are you enamored by the national anthem? Do we need a new national anthem? The sort of thing you get on your local radio phone in every now and again. I think Benson Boone could knock out a fairly decent tune that might get a few more of us singing along nicely. I rarely go to bed without putting his greatest hit on. This comes from Matt down in London. Andrew's behaviour is not news, and Harry being a disrespectful bully who's married to an odious liar is not new. Allegedly, I should say, according to Matt, not us. The royal family is needed and supported and will reach a golden age with William, Catherine and their great kids at the helm, says Matt. Thank you for that. And this one in from Andy, who says, by this logic, the government should be campaigning for full uncontrolled migration to transform us into the richest country on earth. Let's see how that pledge would hold up at the next election. This is reference to the story we're about to talk about in terms of how much individual migrants contribute to this country. Oh, and by the way, on the royal issue, Rosie told me off and says, horses don't gallop down the Mall unless they are riderless. Can't they gallop with a rider on them? Is that a thing? Is it like you can't call the Union Jack unless it's on a ship? You can't say a horse is galloping if someone's sitting. Is it one of those? I mean, what do? There's a bit of a gallop going on, isn't there? I'm sure there's some galloping happening. Check those hooves, Rosie. Check those hooves. So let's move to this story then. This is Labour Police and Crime Commissioners. I mean, it's just extraordinary, this. Who are saying that migrants boost public finances. Despite all that goes with it, of course, rising costs, surging benefit claims, small boat arrivals, far outpacing returns, social housing stretch, security worries mounting, and the migration debate, of course, intensifies. So they're claiming that migrants contribute £341,000 each to public finances over their lifetime. Now, if you're talking about a neurosurgeon, I don't have any trouble accepting that that would be the case, or, you know, some head engineer or IT specialist. I can see that. The average Joe rowing across the channel, I don't believe that for 1 second. The average bloke in this country who came to this country from another place, who's mooching around delivering food for a living or is an Uber driver or something, I don't believe that that is their net contribution. Not for 1 second. Let's get some help on this. Henry Bolton, International Border Control expert, is with us. Always good to gauge your views, Henry. I don't want to take any wind out your sails, but I'm pretty sure I'm onto something in what I was just saying there. We all understand the neurosurgeon, not sure about Bob on the boat.
No. Well, the Police and Crime Commissioners in this case, up in the northeast primarily, as I understand it, have actually looked at a pretty specific category of immigrant. They've looked at people who arrive at the age of 25 or before and live until at least 80, and don't, as a result, include the vast majority of immigrants. They also talk about the skilled immigrants, so quietly, so are leaving out all of those low-skilled or unskilled immigrants who come in legally or illegally. And they don't look at the cost to the Treasury, to the taxpayer, of housing, of benefits, of healthcare and so on over that period of time, education, what have you. So this is a very thin report in that sense, in terms of its data set. And it's also contradicted by a whole range of other analysis. So, no, this is selective. It's political in nature. And I think we can, the worrying thing is that we've got 3 police and crime commissioners who are clearly not particularly interested in the evidence.
It's beyond worrying, isn't it, really? It's only when you consider these are elected positions, of course, and to be wheeling out what are, at best, fabricated statistics. And the omissions, as you rightly say, Henry, are so vast in this story that it completely makes a mockery. And, and thirdly, one would assume if you're a police, crime commissioners, that's an official position. It's a position that carries a weight of responsibility, that accuracy would be sort of paramount to that role.
Yeah, well, you'd hope so, wouldn't you, Ian? But also, part of this is about crime figures, but you would not expect an elected representative whose responsibility, if you like, statutory responsibility rests with policing, to be talking about the economic effect or impact, good or otherwise, of immigration. They're stepping outside their area of work. Now, politicians do that, and they are politicians of a sort, so maybe that's to be expected. But I don't think it's healthy. Yeah. They need to be focusing on delivering effective policing for their communities. That's what their job is. And believe you me, that is a big enough job without you starting to sort of track off into other directions, such as advocating effectively greater immigration.
Indeed.
So you're right about the evidence as well. Policing is all about evidence. And here we have 3 people who are supposed to be overseeing policing who don't seem particularly keen on how thorough the evidence is.
And there are some inconvenient facts, proper facts, that sort of rather go against the thrust of what they were trying to say. The Office of Budget Responsibility, it's a fairly neutral affair, not exactly known to wheel out right-wing data, in fact often accused of the opposite. They found that low-wage migrants cost the taxpayer £150,000 each by state pension age, which is much more than they pay in. Migrants occupy 48% of London's social housing. I mean, that's in itself nearly 50% of London social housing, costing £3.6 billion a year, but are less likely to access social housing nationally. I mean, it's extraordinary that these stats are there for these people to have seen, and they decided to ignore them.
But, increasingly in the British population writ large doesn't have the attention span, the time, or the ability to concentrate on the detail of these things. So really it's the headlines that count, and it's the headlines that people take their ideas from. And when you've got 3 police and crime commissioners who will have no doubt because they're Labour police and crime commissioners, they will have supporters within the Labour Party and on the left who will all too readily just simply accept the face value of these statistics. So it actually perpetuates and digs in a problem of misconception as to what the situation is. And as you say, I mean, you've given some facts there of the other end of the spectrum. They've taken the high end, if you like, the skilled workers, those of the small proportion of immigrants who are really at the top end of skills and contribution for the majority of their life, or indeed the entirety of their working life, rather than looking at the other end. So they've not balanced it out. And when you balance it out, if you're lucky, there's maybe 10 grand sort of on average contribution financially to the exchequer and to the community. So no, I mean, it's a very sad thing, and it's an indictment on the state of our politics and on media reporting, really.
Spot on. I mean, there's something really disturbing about this. I mean, we can sort of laugh it off when you go, what a load of old rubbish. But actually, like I said at the beginning, these are elected officials who are essentially wheeling out leaflets that contain, well, not to put too fine a point on it, some untruths, certainly some elasticity with their stats. Henry, thank you as ever. Henry Bolton is an international border control expert. Thank you to him. The other thing that was stated on the leaflet was that only 12% of prisoners are immigrants, which matches the population share. One study links immigration waves to falling crime rates. I mean, I don't know what that's about. By the way, for the record, I've never thought for 1 second the average migrant is, you come over here, you overstay your visa, for example. I know what I'll start robbing people. I don't think that's the general case. But if you've got disproportionality in some areas, and we know there has been that, then you are frankly forced to kind of look at that and just digest it for what it is. Make of it in different ways if you want to. Mark, back to the Royals. Marco in Sunderland says, afternoon, Squire. These people who say the Royals work 24/7, absolute tosh. Charlie Boy even gets people to put toothpaste on his brush. That's how they all live into their 90s. Somebody once told me that the Royals have somebody to put their pants on. I'm not making this up. And I was trying to think of all the jobs that you wouldn't want to have. I am His Majesty's pantage, or whatever you would call it. I don't think you would want that job. The toothpaste thing, I do hear from time to time, I don't know if that is strictly true, that they all have somebody put toothpaste on their brush. Because have you ever tried putting toothpaste on a brush and leaving it there, especially if you've got a round brush that's an electric toothbrush? It just rolls over, and the toothpaste, so, I don't know how you'd do it. Unless they stand there as they're, while they're waiting to... I don't know how that would work. Might be true, might not be true. What we do know is that, yes, somebody does get your kit and your clothes ready. I don't imagine Prince Charles needs to think too much, or King Charles, rather, needs to think too much about which suit he's going to wear the next day. I think there's people employed precisely to do all of that. But do they stick a pair of shorts and a rugby shirt on, when the curtains are closed? Maybe. Maybe. Adi is in Lincoln. Adi, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello there, Ian. Thanks very much for taking my call.
Pleasure. What are you thinking?
I was a little bit put out by all the anti-monarchist sentiment on your show today, and I thought I'd phone in and sort of politely see if I could change your mind a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think that we had the guest on, but I think most of the callers have been mostly in favour.
Yeah, fair enough, yeah. Well, his point was that, the monarchy is outdated and it's a bizarre institution. Yeah. Could easily do away with it. And then one of the big arguments is, it costs us a lot of money. And the first thing I'd like to point out is a president would probably cost us even more money. Think of how much the Obamas cost the US taxpayers a year, probably about 40 to 70 million pounds equivalent. By that measure, the king seems like a bargain in comparison. Yeah. And when he brings in tourist money, people are very quick to sort of dismiss that and say, it's tourist money. People always make that argument. Well, they make that argument for a reason. They do bring in a lot of money, and as you mentioned on your show many times, we are skint in this country, and I'd have thought any revenue stream from foreign money is a good thing, so why do away with that? You'd
think so, wouldn't you?
Also, I think countries that have monarchies tend to be stabler, they tend to have less corruption. Yeah. Monarchs are raised for the job for life from when they're born, unlike presidents, so they're better at it.
But we can all agree, Adi, can't we, that it's if you look at it from one angle, it's a bit bizarre, but it does kind of work, right? That's the way we look at it.
I think there is a paradox around it if you want to look at it from that angle. Yeah. But it works, and I think you're in the best position to have a constitutional monarchy than any other form of government. And why not have an apolitical head of state? I mean, if you think about it, Donald Trump is head of state in the US, and half the people hate his guts. So do they feel represented by their head of state? Yeah. No, but King Charles can be apolitical, and he can represent everyone. So he's more democratic than the president, if you look at it that way.
That's a
so
good
for
point.
all these reasons, there are brilliant reasons that the monarchy. Now, I'm not saying that the royal family is perfect, and there will always be interesting characters, shall we say, at the very least. But the institution of monarchy, I think, is a vital, a modern prerequisite for the fully perfect functioning of a state like Great Britain.
I like it.
People that knock it really aren't thinking through the arguments, or they have a vested interest.
That's the problem, because also even if we got rid of it and went down the presidential Republican route, then we'd be trying it out for at least a decade to see if it worked and tweaking it and trying to get it right. So there'd be all of that to contend with as well. So if for no other reason that, this is what we're familiar with and we know it has a function and that function is largely positive, then we kind of keep it. We just wouldn't invent it if it was suggested tomorrow from scratch. Listen, Adi, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. This one comes from Mr. Watchman. Reference horses. Rosie corrected us. I said seeing horses gallop down the Mall, and Rosie said they don't gallop because there's people on them. They only gallop when there's nobody on them. Mr. Watchman says a horse can walk, trot, canter and gallop. That's it. That's true. And they also leave their mark, of course, shall we say. Well, why are people not quite so offended by horse poo as they are by dog stuff? And well, what is that? Given that horses can knock out something that looks like a flipping roundabout. And yet, your Chihuahua goes a bit ape in the rear end and it's an absolute fill fest. I know. I know because I'm a dog walker. I see the mucky swines that don't pick it up. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. More on the royal family, more on the migrant story as well, what it costs per person per year. Is it a gain? Is it a loss? Details on that, and of course back to you on the phones coming next.
I know that
Israel's military has reportedly launched an attack in Gaza after accusing Hamas of violating the ceasefire. Israeli troops came under fire in southern Gaza in Rafah, prompting the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, to retaliate with airstrikes. That's according to the Times of Israel. An Israeli military official said Hamas terrorists had carried out multiple attacks against Israeli forces beyond the yellow line that marks areas under Israel's military control in a bold violation of the ceasefire, according to the Israelis. The attack included an RPG shot at a military force and a sniper fire.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Not only talk about the royal family, but royal equestrian elements as well, the capabilities of royal horses and the like. On that very point, let's get a voice note.
Hi Ian, it's Debs from Lincolnshire, founder of Forces Equine. If the horse goes galloping down the Mall, then the Household Cavalry or King Street are going to be well in the pup because it could kill someone. And also, you would never really canter or gallop a horse on hard ground, just putting it out there. So yeah, they do gallop, but not down the Mall. Anyway, take it easy. Debs in Lincolnshire.
Yeah, all right, Debs. What about false grass? You can put that down. You can get it in B&Q, just rolls of it. Theoretically, so what I was doing, the reason this started is I mentioned about the sort of the pomp and the ceremony of like flags and horses galloping down the Mall majestically. So it was a kind of turn of phrase. I didn't realise that I was going to open up an entire debate about equine capabilities when it comes to tarmac versus field. But I sense, even though this is Deb's world and not mine, I can imagine that if a horse went tonto down the Mall on that, a gravelly road, a road surface, it probably wouldn't be the ideal place to start going fast. I don't imagine the horse would like that very much, would it? But when one goes nuts, because every now and again one does go rogue, doesn't it? It's always a bit of a disturbing scene because they're so flipping huge. You forget how big one of those horses are. About what do they measure them in hands or something? Whose hands is it, by the way? Is it just the hand of the... I have no idea about that world. I know they're big. I know they're majestic. I know they're beautiful and impressive. Thank you, Debs, for that. Let's get a call on the monarchy. Daniel is in Epsom. Dan, how are you doing?
Ian, good afternoon, yeah.
Afternoon.
So, I just want to give you the point of view of the white working class. I guess my dad was very patriotic. Our whole family were.
Yep.
And we used to have a picture of the Queen over our dining room table, watching us eat all of our meals. It was just normal for us, and we were very much royalist. But as I've aged, my dad's left us now, but as I've aged, I sort of look at Prince King Charles and William, and as the monarchy's gone more woke and they've gone more... I mean, he's a globalist, Charles. I get the feeling no more they don't love the British people. I get the feeling that they're no longer we're no longer on the same side. And I'm sort of veering away from being a royalist now, really.
It's interesting, isn't it? Did it just... I don't know, because so many things in the last 20, 30 years, we're not dissimilar age, Dan, and clearly very similar backgrounds, apart from the picture of the Queen, although we did have a biscuit tin with the Queen on it, so maybe that kind of counts. But there's so many things since then to now have changed. Is it the inevitable direction of travel? Because this global thing fascinates me. Because the likes of you and I will look at a kind of an England or on the wider issue of the United Kingdom. We've got a different view of what it once was, and we see it as being an infinitely better structure of how we lived. But are we just old gits who are hankering something that is no longer achievable?
No. Do you know what it is? I think the royals must read the news. They must see that our society is declining and degrading, right? And at some point, I expect King Charles to sort of ring up, I don't know, whoever the Prime Minister is, and go, listen, this immigration issue, that it's very unpopular amongst the British majority. It's destroying the country. Any chance you can do something about it? Because but they won't ever do that. They won't ever say, "Oh, our citizens are living in a crime-ridden country. Don't you think it's time that we did X or Y? Because my citizens aren't safe." But they won't do that. I've just written to Charles and Prince William. Actually, nice. I wrote to them about the destruction of our democracy, because I noticed that the Con Lab Uniparty are trying to delay the local elections again for the second year running. And I don't think, if they represent our democracy, I don't think it's right that people can pay... why should you pay your council tax if you can't vote?
What is the... I don't know if I'd spotted that or not. What is their...
the local elections were were not held in a vast swathes of the country in May this year. Because,
yes, that's right. I remember that.
Because Tory councils wrote to the Labour government, and obviously they know they're going to get a trouncing by reform, so they delayed it for a year. Now there's talk of them delaying it again for another year, right, in certain councils, and I think that's wrong, and I think that's an erosion of our democracy, and that's the kind of issue where King Charles or Prince William should step in and go, no, you're wrong to do that. You're not right to do that. This isn't right. You're waylaying elections because you know you're going to lose. And I don't think that's fair. They are issues that they should be able to get involved with, but they don't. And meanwhile, the country's going to hell in a handcart, and I don't think that the royal family have our best interests at heart anymore. I don't think they personally care about me or mine, and I just think they're more interested in this globalist agenda.
That's really interesting. I hadn't considered it in that kind of way. Dan, thank you very much for that. Great call. And it's, I do wonder, kind of the wider question that came up with Dan there is about the world you live in. And the kind of global nature of the world. I'm not talking about, global institutions that we find trouble in from time to time, like the United Nations or the World Health Authority, where there are, they often throw up more questions than they do answers, these places. But just the global nature of who we are, which we can't really run away from, because, you can travel around like you never could before. Some of this feeds into immigration as well, which is an area that I think politicians really need to get a handle on. But things do change. We've got a digital world. It's nothing weird about having an email conversation. If you had an auntie that lives in Australia, it would take, between you writing to them and them writing back, would be about 3 months. And now you just drop an email or a text or whatever. You can phone, it won't even cost you anything. It's all of that stuff. So are we deluded to sort of romanticise about what it once was? And I guess every era, every generation goes through that a little bit. Pat is down in London. What have you got for us? Pat, good afternoon.
Well, first of all, before I come on to the main topic of what I'm going to say, is that I couldn't give a monkey's whether the royal family are in position or not. But I'm not a left-wing thinker.
Okay.
But what I propose is that if they want real legitimacy in this day and age, that I think the government we won't do it, but I think they should call a referendum. Do you want a royal family or don't you? That should be on the ballot paper.
Sure.
And I think, personally, I couldn't care less one way or the other whether they're in position or not. But I would think that the amount of people in the country, that they would win it reasonably by a reasonable majority.
You think they would win it to retain it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're probably right in a weird way. If we didn't have a royal family, though, and someone invented one, then I don't think people would vote for it, would they?
No. But the thing is, if they're so confident, why don't they have a referendum?
Yeah.
And I believe that it would be, about where the Brexit vote, about 48 to 52.
Sure.
So really, but the only thing it would give them is a democratic mandate.
Yeah. It would do that, wouldn't it? That
would give them a reason to carry on.
Yeah, got it. I like it. Pat, thank you very much indeed for that. Great call. Mark in Exmoor says, the only way we'll ever be able to become a republic is if the royal family decides to finish it all. It's completely ingrained into our constitution, and most importantly, the military swear allegiance to the crown, not politicians, but to the crown. I served as a Grenadier Guardsman with Her Majesty the Queen, when Her Majesty the Queen was still with us, and the household division is the monarch's personal soldiers. So if politicians ever tried to oust the monarchy and the monarch said no, then the military and the police are loyal to the crown and will disobey orders from Parliament, says Mark in Exmoor. Would it come to that? Because that would be a news story. That'd keep us going for about 3 weeks here on Afternoons. I don't know if it would ever come to that. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's Talk 25 to 3. So let's move to this story. This one's been niggling me all day long, frankly. Ed Miliband hinting that energy VAT may go in the autumn budget, raising hopes but stops short of firm promises. This will be the removal of VAT from our bills. Labour is aiming for £300 bill cuts by 2030. Meanwhile, the government has pledged 400,000 new clean energy jobs. Oh, sounds rather impressive. I saw Miliband say this at the weekend and I thought, well, it's okay. I'd like to know where and what kind of jobs they are. Are they government jobs? Are they essentially civil servant jobs in some form? Are they people unpacking solar panels that have just arrived from China? Let's get a word on this first. We'll talk to Claire Cortino in just a second, Shadow Energy Secretary. First, Caroline Bragg, CEO of AID, the Association for Decentralised Energy. Caroline, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, 400,000 jobs, some even saying 500,000 jobs. Very impressive. Who doesn't want to see more jobs on the market? Do you know where they would be?
Yeah, so there's a range of sectors that they are targeting. I think one of the most interesting things about the plans that have been announced is that actually about 180,000 of the 400 jobs that they are looking to add to 2030 are in areas where the government has not set out clear ambitions yet. And that's particularly, for example, in heat, decarbonisation, as well as broader sectors, including industrial decarbonisation, where we think there's more than 1 million jobs that are currently being employed in industries that need to have a pathway forward into the future, including on decarbonisation.
What sort of jobs would they be, Caroline? What are we talking about here? I mentioned slightly facetiously, unpacking solar panels from China, but I would imagine something like that would be included, some basic manual jobs.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a real mix when you look at the government's plans today. So we've got a lot of the jobs they're looking at are things like construction, for example, also electronics, some industries, for example, like steel, as well as engineering and technology, and broader jobs, actually, things like project management, things like this that are going to be needed as well.
In terms of replacing jobs, I was reading something at the weekend where, there's a lot of very highly skilled jobs on things like oil rigs and stuff like that. If that world is disappearing, which it clearly is, whatever people think about that, are there going to be equally well-paid, kind of skilled jobs in this sector?
I think this is one of the big questions that we need to see over the next 5 years. The government is making a big play for these jobs being well paid, so sort of £50,000, as well as obviously these plans including quite strong ambitions around trade union representation. I think the most important thing with this really is that for all of what has been announced over the weekend, what really matters is whether private business can actually make these types of industries work. And the big decision that will mean whether that can go forward or not is really the autumn budget, and whether we see, for example, support for industrial sectors outside of the hydrogen clusters, and whether we see some decision on how we get bills down for heat.
We will watch with interest. We will speak again. Caroline, thank you. Caroline Bragg, CEO of the Association for Decentralised Energy. Let's speak with Claire Cortino, Shadow Energy Secretary. Of course, Claire, this was, Ed Miliband's brief used to be your brief. All of this would have been on your desk at one point. Would you have been telling people like me that we've got 500,000 jobs on the way?
Well, I would be very worried about some of the things that I just heard, which is at the moment we have lots of jobs in heavy industry and in the North Sea, for example, which we know are going. And we've seen that. We're already losing thousands of jobs in those areas because of the high cost of energy. Now, what Ed is saying is, I've got 400,000 jobs for you to replace them, but he hasn't been very clear about what they are. He's including things like plumbers, for example. I mean, I don't think, plumbers in the past were counted as a renewable energy job, but there we go.
True.
And the question is, how much subsidy do you need from government for those jobs? We know that some of the renewable jobs which already exist have £200,000 of subsidy behind them, and that subsidy is being paid for on people's energy bills. So to this point of, I think the lady before me was just saying, one of the key things around jobs is how do you bring down the price of bills, and the fact that we have the highest electricity prices in the world. I don't think the answer is by increasing amounts of subsidies for jobs going on people's bills. So this is the big problem. And actually what we've said as a party is that we think we are now in a counterproductive place when it comes to the Climate Change Act. We need to repeal it. And actually what we need to focus on when it comes to energy policy is the single biggest problem that we've got as a country, which is that we've got the highest electricity bills in the world. And so we've set out plans to do that, to cut people's bills by 20%. But I think part of the problem is if you keep subsidizing jobs through people's bills at very high prices, then overall you're losing jobs in the economy.
Some might say, Claire, not unreasonably, look, you were in power, this was your brief. Where was all of this intent back then? I know it's a question you probably get every single day of the week, but it didn't feel back then that you were in the position you're in now. Is that fair?
Well, so I came in that last 11 months of the Conservative government, and I appreciate, that this is a
halcyon days, weren't they?
On. And well, I'm not sure many would describe them as that, but I came in that last 11 months, and the first 3 weeks I did a net zero reset, and we started talking about the cost to consumers. And one of my tasks was to get under the bonnet of these things. So I did push back, for example, bans and targets on consumers, on boilers, and on cars. And actually I was being sued by lots of people in the Green lobby for those changes, which were controversial at the time. So you can argue we didn't go far enough. But what I did do at that time, and this time in opposition, is look at all the details and evidence about what's happening. And that's why we're in the current position. And like I said, I'm not against training people. I think that's wonderful. I'm not against new jobs. I think that's brilliant. What I am very worried about is the price of our bills. And I think the absolute priority has got to be bringing those energy bills down, which is why we've looked very carefully at what needs to happen. As I said, we've set out a plan which could cut people's electricity bills by 20% instantly.
But if you won the next election, I know the polls at the moment are, pretty much against you, Claire, but, we are 4 years away from an election. Anything could happen. By that stage, Ed Miliband would be, I don't know, halfway through his grand plans of changing the world. What would happen then? Would you reverse all of that? Would you carry on with some of it? Because that becomes almost a Gordian knot, the mother of all headaches, right?
Well, one of the things that's incredibly worrying, you're right, is that in January he's about to sign up to 20-year contracts for renewables. And these are the highest prices we've seen in a decade, far, far higher than the current cost of electricity. I mean, just to give you an example, the current cost of electricity is around £70 to £80 a megawatt hour. He said he's willing to pay up to £117 for offshore wind. That's on a 20-year fixed contract. And before you add in all the other additional costs you've got to put on top, like paying wind farms to turn off when it's too windy, building out all of the grid connections, for example. So he could be fixing us into a 10% fixed rate mortgage for decades. I mean, it's not just what you and I will be paying, it's what our kids will be paying. So yes, I think that is a very big worry. And one of the things that we are doing at the moment is we are saying that they should halt this auction, because you'll remember what it was like when we had all of the PFI contracts going through on our public services, on hospitals and schools, and we're still paying them off, still. So yes, I think what Ed is trying to do in terms of locking us into these higher prices for longer is very, very dangerous. And that's why the work we are doing at the moment is to calling on them to stop it.
Do you think he's lost the plot?
Oh, God, that's a good question. I don't know. I think that some of this information is dawning on him. We saw just last week, energy bosses said to a parliamentary committee that even if gas went to zero, even if gas was at zero, all of the fixed costs of Ed's plans are going to push bills up. And I know that there were people on the Parliamentary Select Committee who were surprised by that. I was not surprised by that. This is what I've been saying. And I think the message might be starting to hit home. And ultimately, he's in a huge challenge here, because he promised people he would cut their bills by £300 by 2030. And everything we've seen is that bills are going up under Ed Miliband. So I think the sensible thing to do would have been Keir to have got rid of him at the reshuffle, as he was trying to do, and put someone in who actually was more pragmatic and less ideological.
When it comes to the overarching issue of climate change and all that goes with it, now obviously there's people in certain quarters have different views. Some think it's almost a United Nation con job, as Donald Trump called it. He literally said it's the greatest con job of our time. Those were his words. Others think we're not going to go far enough and we'll all be dead, and so will all of our animals by 2040 or something, because we're going to fry or drown to death or something like that. Where are you on this? When you were Secretary of State, was there anything that ever came across for your eyes only that said, don't tell anyone this, Claire, but this is really serious, or this isn't as serious, but we've got to push it anyway? And obviously, by definition, asking you that, you can't actually answer it.
Well, no, look, I don't deny that climate change is happening. What I think is the problem is that the approach that we're taking is incredibly bureaucratic and counterproductive. We are only 1% of emissions. 99% of emissions are happening elsewhere. They are rising. So every time we cut emissions by making our bills really expensive, and a business moves from here to somewhere still powered by coal, you're making the whole situation worse. If you look at what Ed's doing in the North Sea, instead of using North Sea gas, we're now importing gas with 4 times the emissions. That makes the whole situation worse. So our position is this: we've got a priority for energy, which is to bring down the price of electricity. And that will be good for the economy. It'll be good for households. And there's an extra benefit. If you want people to use electric cars and electric home heating, for example, instead of banning them and taxing them and forcing them into it when they don't want to do it because electricity is so expensive, you could just make electricity cheap. And then what people want to do with that electricity is up to them. But I can guarantee you a lot more people would want electric cars if electricity was really, really cheap in this country. So that's our approach. We think it's going to be much more beneficial for lots of reasons to focus on bringing down the price of electricity, which is the major problem that we have in this country when it comes to energy policy.
Yeah,
and then when it comes, sorry.
No, continue, sorry.
So when it comes to the rest of the world, instead, again, of Britain just focusing on its domestic emissions, we've done more than anyone, and actually nobody else is following our lead. So when it comes to the rest of the world, I think the most sensible approach is to say, look, we're a country that's great at making things. We should focus on inventing things, making them here, and selling them to the rest of the world so we can help other people with their emissions, as opposed to just forcing our country into a hair shirt.
Yeah, and I was looking at the figures the other day for emissions, which I think we've reduced by 20-30% in the last few decades. So it's huge progress, and that's the direction.
Halved them.
Well, indeed. So even more than that, and of course that's the direction of travel. So it always seems odd. I think a lot of our listeners to this think we're kind of being told almost by the sort of doomsday death cult brigade of this argument that we've got to do more, we've got to do more. But it's not something that can happen overnight. The progress is being made.
Exactly, and I think this has become a whole sort of fantasy land for bureaucrats, because what they get to do through the Climate Change Act is come up with targets and quotas and plans for every single section of society and the economy. And actually, it's counterproductive, because on the one hand, you're making electricity really expensive. On the other hand, you're trying to ban and force people into electric cars and electric home heating. So those two things are pulling in completely the opposite direction. And instead of that, I think a conservative approach would say, look, let's address the underlying problem. Let's make electricity much cheaper. By the way, that's a good thing for the economy. That's a good thing for households as well. And then what people want to do with that electricity, which is now much cheaper, is up to them.
Just a final point, I was looking at that figure of 400,000 new jobs. I wondered if half of them were going to be SPADs in Ed's department, because he's got a PhD in staffing over there in that department. I'm not sure it was quite as crammed full of additional advisors when you were doing that job.
Well, I think he could definitely do with some better advice if these are the best plans he can come up with.
Yeah, good point. Listen, nice to have you with us, Claire. Thank you for your time. Claire Coutinho, who is the Shadow Energy Secretary. She previously was Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, the job that now Ed Miliband, of course, does. Thank you to her. Over to you on that one, 0344 499 1000. More on the Royals' voice of doom on the way. The migrant story. Now we're on to net zero. 400,000 jobs. Well, Are you working in a sector anywhere at the moment? So like going, wow, we can't wait because there's going to be thousands more jobs just in our neck of the woods after Ed has decreed what he's going to do to save the planet. 0344 499 1000.
There is an organisation.
Sadiq Khan and the Metropolitan Police Commissioners have continued to deny trauma suffered by grooming gang survivors.
The evidence is sickening. Children as young as 13 raped in London hotels by groups of men. It's all there in the official reports that the mayor personally read. And for I don't know how long now he's been saying that there's no grooming gangs here. But his own documents, the same ones that he responded to, is exactly the same pattern or a similar pattern to what we saw in Rochdale. The evidence is there in black and white.
Right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This in from Don, reference to the royal family. Why would anybody admire the royals? They kill animals and birds for sport. They don't work 24/7 and have long holidays on their vast estates. Well, that is one way of looking at it. I'd imagine them. I think the minor royal job is the one to have, isn't it? When you're kind of a bit of a cousin. Because they're all living in just ludicrous opulence in that world. When my dad was around, and he was a painter and decorator, I don't know how this happened, he ended up painting, not all of it, because it was too big, Lady Mountbatten's house, just outside Ashford in Kent. I think she would have been Lord Mountbatten's wife, I think. Anyway, her, and she was very nice, she was a very pleasant old lady, or oldish then. But did some duties because she wasn't, she was patron of, God knows how many charities and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, just lived in this just gorgeous. You think, well, that's a gig and a half, isn't it? Like acres and acres of land, staff all over the place, driven from here to there, but with none of the real responsibility of being as a senior royal would have. Before we go back, we'll talk to Louise in Kent in just a second on this very issue of royalty. Voice of Doom, day three on this one, OK? So it's quite new. It's the mystery voice, but it's political. Who is this?
Because it's based on a deception.
Any thoughts on that? I don't think that's as hard as some of them have been in the past, but if you think you know, 87222, here it is again.
Because it's based on a deception.
If you think you know, that's the number, 87222. I will tell you, we'll give you the answer after the news, but only if somebody identifies it correctly. Here it is one more time.
Because it's based on a deception.
87222. Don't phone, just message. Back to your calls. Louise is in Deepest Kent. Hello, Louise.
Hi.
Hello.
Do you know what, Ian? I've spoken to you several times before, but that's fine. What I'm finding really difficult about this is all this stuff about Andrew and actually Sarah as well. What about Beatrice and Usaini?
Yes.
Because my own father caused a terrible divorce. He went off with prostitutes and orgies. He never admitted what he did was wrong, never understood it destroyed the family. I got diagnosed with a mental illness because it was so bad. We've now proved that was wrong, and I've managed to overturn all of that.
Yeah.
They realised that it was the fallout from a divorce 50 years ago. Somehow, poor Eugenie and Beatrice had the fallout from this. They've got to explain to their own grandchildren, their own children, what's happened when they read the press, but also for mental health. You know,
how do you explain that about your granddad, you know, to their kids? This is what Granddad did. And they, as I understand it, Andrew and Sarah, I think, took the girls with them when they went to meet Epstein after he came out of jail. I mean, what did they
I know, how dare they? So for me, that is, I'm finding this really hard. And in many ways, the other bit I wanted to add to it was what I really struggle with everywhere today is that no one is able to hold their hands up and say, do you know what? I got it wrong, and I'm sorry. And it doesn't matter whether it's Prince Andrew, Rachel Reeves blaming Brexit, even though everybody says what she's done is wrong, etc. She's not able to say, look, I got this wrong. No one is. No one was. It was Khan, was everyone. I find that, and how much would it help if Prince Andrew had just said, look, I made some really major mistakes here.
Imagine how different that Newsnight interview could have been, and instead, you know, he kind of, you know, threw in more than one porky pie in that interview, and he was really pleased with it because his vanity was so off the scale that he thought just by being fluent and answering questions, it would be credible because it was him. And most people didn't nobody believed all of it, and many people would say, well, even some of it sounded a bit iffy, to be generous.
But my dad was the same, denial his whole life, didn't, you know. So, but for me, even if he said now, and Sarah, we got this wrong, so we are sinking back into, we're not going to be seen around, nothing.
Yeah.
Because also, my problem is all this screwing the knife in constantly is mental health. Just supposing he did the worst, then what would happen?
Yeah.
That is really hard. So for me, you know, with all of this, I'm finding this really, really hard because it's bringing back all...
I'm sure it is, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people in that position, and you think of those girls that were victims, and, you know, there are some cases of people who we know who they are, and a very high profile Virginia Giuffre, who's no longer with us, of course, but others that will be going through this too. Louise, I've got to move for no other reason than time. Very, very powerful stuff, and thank you. Good to talk again. Let's go to Graham in Lincolnshire on a different subject. This is the religion that is, well, Ed Miliband's religion, I suppose we could call it. Graham, what are you thinking?
Well, hello, Ian. Can I be a bit rotten to you, please? And I'm saying, you agreeing with Claire, I think the surname was Coutinho, the Shadow Secretary of State, on the idea that that CO2 is a problem, you know, and we've done a great. Just hear me out. And that we've done a great job in reducing it as much as we have done. I know. I'm sorry. Can I stick up for CO2?
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with CO2, by the way. I've got a funny feeling we might all die without it, but I get that. But I don't. I think if you have an imbalance, as I understand it, in what you're emitting, then you can run into a problem. Nothing wrong with a cleaner world, right?
No. I think the word clean is completely inappropriate here.
That's interesting.
CO2 that CO2 is the gas of life. It's crucial for us all. And in fact, over the last, 40, 50 years or so, well, in fact, since about 1700, it's been steadily increasing. We are responsible for part of that, but only a very small part of it.
Yeah.
And do you know what's happened over the last 30, 40 years?
Go on.
An area the size of the United States in the world has now gone green because there's more CO2 in the atmosphere. Crop yields are going through the roof. This is because it's plant food.
Because it's plant food. No, I do hear that. My only question, Graham, I have to move because the news is upon us. My only question on that is that even, I know some scientists can be a bit, economical with the data, but I got a feeling that the world of science generally would be able to recognise that, we need more of it if that was the argument. That's Graham in Lincolnshire. We've got the Voice of Doom coming up. Who is this?
Because it's based on a deception.
Find out after the news if we have a right answer. It's 3 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome back. Home of common sense. So much to get through. We are talking Prince Andrew facing a police probe after allegedly asking his own police bodyguard for personal data on Virginia Giuffre. Now, this breaks all kinds of laws and rules, if it is true, of course. And the scandal has cost him royal titles and public appearances, with now fresh scrutiny over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Could this be the beginning of the end for the royal family? Also this afternoon, Donald Trump has demanded Ukraine accept Putin's peace terms or face destruction, apparently shouting at Zelensky during their White House talks and pushing for Kyiv to surrender. And, of course, that issue isn't going away anytime soon. But is Donald Trump about to do the double? Although the double is looking a bit iffy after what happened at the weekend, of course. We'll have more on that story. And Ed Miliband hints that VAT could be scrapped on energy bills but won't commit to action before 2030 as energy costs soar. Meanwhile, Labour has promised 400,000 clean energy jobs and £2.5 million for training. Wow, I mean, this is amazing stuff. He solved the problem of life. Nearly 500,000 green jobs. What will those jobs be, by the way? Thank you very much indeed for all the comments we've had so far on this. Rob says, it's my understanding that many of the 400,000 green jobs will not actually be new jobs. Rather, they are including things like a delivery driver who happens to drive an electric van. This will be an existing job, but will magically become a green job as he's driving an EV. That's a very good point. It's a very good point, isn't it? We've also got loads of comment coming through on the issue of royalty. We'll come back to that in a couple of moments' time. First, though, let's look at this story of what happened at the weekend. Israel bombing Gaza yesterday after Hamas killed 2 soldiers, halting humanitarian aid over what it called a blatant violation of the ceasefire deal. Israel's also accused Hamas of executing Palestinian civilians. Always hard to get to the real truth of what is happening in some of these stories. We're always helped out by Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst. Simon, good afternoon to you. I mean, there is a body of thought that kind of expected sort of rumblings like this post this peace agreement. Does it mean that agreement is done and dusted and finished?
Good afternoon to you too. I think it shows the kind of pressures that could break that agreement, but I would also suggest at the moment it's not completely broken yet. The difficulty with the agreement was it made no real plans, apart from a ceasefire, for who was going to run and control the Gaza, or the bit of Gaza that was left for Hamas to look after. President Trump talked about he was content for Hamas to take charge for a moment, but that Hamas is no different from the Hamas that started the disastrous war with the attack on Israel, and the one that's been fighting ever since. And they're clearly opposed by a number of people. So we've got that really classic kind of post-war, post-ceasefire challenge: who actually controls, who actually runs that state. And I think in those circumstances, instance like we've seen, which saw 2 Israeli soldiers killed, followed then by airstrikes, up to 6 airstrikes by Israel, were likely, I fear.
And I remember last week when this deal was all signed and world leaders came together in Egypt to witness this happen. There was a body of thought, Simon, that said, look, sadly, the way these things work is that you will have these sort of isolated flare-up moments. That sort of goes with the territory. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the situation. I think any time it doesn't happen is if you've really got a force that can very quickly interposition themselves and then taken seriously and will, if you note, enforce a peace on the warring parties. And there is no sign of that force. An instance like we just had, which of course, in a sense of now deteriorated the situation further because Israel has also closed the humanitarian crossing. It means it's going to be even more unlikely that force is going to be rushing to take control. Now, it may well be that a kind of reconvening of the group that made the peace in the first place could take place, and that we could then reimpose some kind of ceasefire. But we'll have to see how that rolls out in the next couple of days.
Indeed. And the other story, of course, which is right bang in the news at the moment, is what happened at the White House on Friday. Zelensky was over there with Trump. We didn't get a public spat like we had a little while back, but apparently voices were raised.
No, absolutely. And actually there is a linkage, which I think is the kind of nature of President Trump's diplomacy. So President Trump was very keen on to have some kind of peace deal in Gaza, and indeed got his peace deal. Yeah. But the detail, as I said, the detail of who controlled it wasn't actually there to follow up. And so similarly, we have the same issue here now with what's happened in Ukraine. So we've had 2 conversations, the high sort of voices being raised, and the detail is really the killer. Because in this instance, what happened was that President Trump was repeating Putin's talking lines, who said, look, just give us the rest of the Donbass. It's only about another 25%. We've got 75% anyway, and everything will be happy. Missing entirely the detail point, which is the remaining bit of the Donbass, exactly where Ukraine's major defensive lines are. Not just now for the future now, but also the future. If Ukraine gave up those bits of land, it then makes it very easy for President Putin to attack again, which of course is exactly what he did, attacking in 2014 and then again attacking in 2022. And that's that problem of detail, which is missing, I think, in the way in which President Trump does his ceasefire details.
In terms of that sort of curious optics of something that only Donald Trump can produce. It's been interesting, isn't it? Because there was the moment, of course, in Alaska when Trump and Putin shook hands. They had their own individual red carpets as they came off their planes, and it was all looking rather good. I can do business with him. And the previous meeting he'd had with Zelensky was, you know, a horror show, as we all know. And then, of course, that sort of turned around again. He started saying, well, Putin's let me down. He's not done what I thought. And Zelensky, we cleared the air. I can do business with this guy. He's talking about Tomahawk weaponry, which, you know, I think Zelensky even bought a transit van to take them back with him. You know, he was that confident that this was going to happen. And now it's sort of gone the other way again.
No, I think that's it. I'd like to see the transit van, but never mind. I think that's I think that's where and I think that's the challenge we've got with him. I mean, to his credit, President Trump will break things that people otherwise wouldn't be able to break. But the difficulty sometimes is that actually, you know, these things are put together very, very slowly, very carefully. And the reason that President Zelensky wanted the Tomahawk missiles, again, is not just about the immediate fight. What he's been asking for since the beginning of the year is what he's called a sub-nuclear strategic deterrent. In other words, once there is some kind of ceasefire, once there's some kind of peace with Russia, he's got something which the Russians respect so much they won't then break that ceasefire. He asking for Tomahawk missiles from the Americans. Now, bit of comparison, he did the same with the F-16. It took time to get there, but he's also been asking for the Taurus missiles from the Germans, which do very much the same sort of thing and have a similar range. Not the extended range Tomahawks got, but they could certainly reach Moscow and quite a lot of the military infrastructure that's fueling this war and fighting this war at the moment. And so that's the point for these missiles. So for President Trump to say, can't have those, but you can have these instead, or would encourage the Germans, would have been different. But it came out as this, no, you can't have them. Having 2 days earlier said, yes, you can have them. And that doesn't leave a good impression.
Yeah, indeed. Simon, thank you as ever for your time. Really appreciate that. Simon Diggins, he is military and defence analyst. It's a confusing picture. We hope that, you know, what is happening over there between Gaza and Israel will revert back to the peace agreement in its entirety. These satellite moments apparently will happen. You know, rogue individuals and all that business, perhaps. Ukraine, I think, is going to be a real difficult one. And it seems, from what we're hearing, Trump has thrown the ball back into Zelensky's court, not into Putin's. 0344 499 1000. We're talking about the royalty as well. Is it the end? Is it the end or the beginning of the end of the royal family? I know you think, well, it's only Prince Andrew. Sure, it doesn't collapse the royal family, but there's other things that have gone on. The transition of power between Queen Elizabeth and King Charles. It's never quite felt like what we had before. I appreciate he's only been there 5 minutes and Queen Elizabeth was there for decades. I understand all of that, but is it now the time when you think, you know, is this thing going to last in a meaningful way? Even if you support it, can it realistically continue? Let's get a voice note on this from Steve in Herne Bay.
Just thought I'd respond to the guy who called in and said that the royal family don't work hard. I actually dig holes for a living. I'm a fencer. It's hard work. However, I'd rather do my job than actually have my whole life mapped out for me. They literally get up, they're told what to do. They can't just go out and get absolutely wasted like we could. You know, it's a different type of work. You know, I wouldn't swap my life for theirs, no matter how privileged people think they are. They do work hard, their life's mapped out and they're under the spotlight in everything they do. That's my 2 pence on it. Thank you very much. Great show, Ian.
Nice one, Steve. Thank you, mate. I think you're absolutely right. It's a kind of weird exists and people go, well, I'd swap it for my life to live in a castle and the palace, but I don't think it's like that. There was a moment, I know Meghan Markle is not always the go-to person to get the truth of a story, but when they did that, was it that Netflix thing they did? She did tell a story which I thought was kind of fascinating, and I can believe this bit because Harry didn't pick her up, but she was talking about one of those moments, you know, when they're all standing on the balcony at Buckingham Palace and they're waving to the crowds and they stand there for an hour and the red arrows go over and what else happens and then they all go back inside. And she said, I kind of assumed, having watched this as an outsider for years, that once the kind of doors were closed and the curtains were pulled, everybody sort of kicks back and goes, oh, great, you know, let's have a drink. And she said it wasn't like that. It was just very businesslike. And there wasn't a moment where they defaulted to a kind of, right, that bit's done, now let's go and get a KFC or whatever. Which sort of rather brings you to the point that Steve made. I think, you know, good, hard-working royals take the job incredibly seriously. I don't think the King looks in William's, whispers in William's ear, you know, oh, did well waving at the peasants there, boy. Now let's have a gin. I don't think that happens. And it could do, but of course, the minute you think, I'll have a beer, someone's going to go, no, you can't have a beer, mate. You've got an appointment at 5. Oh, I'll have one at 6. No, you've got another one at 6. OK, I'll have a beer with my dinner at 7. You're not having dinner at 7. You're having dinner at 9 tonight because you're meeting Lord Smithers and his wife, Melanie Beaujolais McGoulash, whoever. That day in, day out. Yeah, it's not hard work, as Steve said. It's not digging holes, but something comes with that. Richard's down in London on this point of the royals. Richard, what have you got for us?
I mean, I think it should be the start of a process of thinking seriously long term.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 2 points worry me about the amount of time this story gets. Ian, first of all, we now know that or the government have accepted that there'll be an inquiry into the rape gangs. But I mean, that was around Easter, and here we are pushing into November, and there's been no progress. And it worries me that the media. You see, I don't expect Sky or the BBC to put any pressure on the government, but I do rather expect people like GB News and talkTV to put pressure on. And it's kind of like we're being sold down the river with really effectively a rather trivial story compared to tens of thousands of girls being raped. And of course, that leads into the next point, because of course it was King Charles at the turn of the year who said that diversity is one of our strengths. I've said this to you before. He's overstepping the mark here. He should really have said, we've had a difficult year last year, let's all try and pull together. If he pulls if he effectively becomes a standard bearer for diversity, he's part of the same establishment. And of course, Ian, I remind you, we've got to hold the establishment in general responsible for what's happened, certainly with regard to the rape gangs. And you know, I remind you again, we had an inquiry into the murder of Stephen Lawrence, and the government effectively turned it upside down, said everything is institutionally racist. And yet we have something that's really, you know, it's affected tens of thousands of families, and it's kind of got forgotten. And it just worries me. And I also make the point, and actually King Charles himself, I mean, people want Andrew to apologise, and of course he's behaved terribly, but I mean, King Charles has a role in what happened to Princess Diana, and which I think is a modern tragedy. And somehow it's kind of got forgotten about.
Yeah, I think she was very much left out to dry in a way, and she was the most photographed woman in the world. I mean, and the people talking about digging holes versus being a royal. I mean, I can't imagine what her life felt like. She couldn't blink without somebody peeking through the curtains to photograph her. It was, and of course, all of that came off the back of everything that had happened with her marriage and her kids.
Yes, and I mean, frankly, Ian, that could have been prevented, because he could simply have not married somebody who. He really, if he was in love with somebody else, and he shouldn't have married this. Yeah,
but you know, that was all about, I suppose, about having kids, wasn't it? Really, I mean, I think that was part and parcel of the issue, to keep the line going.
People in glass houses, so surely people in glass houses shouldn't be throwing stones. But I do think you're right to. I think it's brave of you to raise this issue, because I mean, there's an also. That's it as a third point. I mean, if William succeeds to the throne, you will have somebody who is the head of the Church of England who has made it clear he doesn't believe in God. So that will need to be fought through, because frankly it's ridiculous.
Did he say he didn't believe in God, William?
He's made it clear he's an unbeliever.
I wasn't aware of that. I know he attends church on a regular basis. I know that doesn't in itself mean anything. But listen, Richard, I've got to move, only for time. That was a great call, by the way. Really nice to chat. Richard down in London with a whole plethora of issues surrounding this one. 0344 499 1000. This one from Mags, South Yorkshire, says, my husband was in the Navy, the driving jobs till he retired. When the Queen died, he said, my service is now finished. He'd sworn allegiance to Her Majesty. Yeah, I think there was, for many people, that was a point. And a friend of mine who'd come from a proper royal household, and he felt also as loyal to the Queen as Mags had just described. He said the minute that coronation happened with the King, something didn't feel right. And he was saying, well, maybe it's because she was there forever in all of our lifetimes. And it was just the optics of seeing somebody new. It just didn't feel right to him. 0344 499 1000. Right, before we go any further, it's the voice of doom. Have we got a winner? Remember, this is the voice we played you.
Because it's based on a deception.
Who is that? These are some of the guesses. John Stonehouse, Gwaine Towler, Alan Simpson, Sebastian Coe, no. Malcolm Bruce, no. Jonathan Dimbleby, Peter Mandelson, Nigel Evans, Robert Buckland, Michael Gove, no. Somebody says Harriet Harman. Can we just hear it again?
Because it's based on a deception.
It's very, very like Harriet Harman, isn't it? Just listen to the last word again.
Based on a deception.
Yeah. You know, when she had laryngitis at the time. No, of course it's not Harriet Harman. Rupert Lowe, no. Mel Stride, no. Stephen Kinnock, no. We haven't got a right answer. It rolls over to tomorrow. That means about 2:45 tomorrow on the programme. It's day 4 of The Voice of Doom. Back with more calls from you on the way. We're talking royalty, migration, net zero. Oh, there's so much to get through. Lines are open, 3:20. This is Talk.
There is an organisation called the Centre for Media Monitoring, which grew out of the Muslim Council of Britain, and it is there supposedly to monitor the media and to identify examples of alleged Islamophobia in reporting. And they've claimed things like the news reports that Salman Abedi, who attacked the Manchester Arena, chanted Islamic slogans before detonating his device, that those reports were Islamophobic for saying that.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 23 minutes after 3 o'clock. This one from on Net Zero. Jules says, other countries are not following our lead on climate change because they listen to independent scientists who show climate change is a natural phenomenon. Always happened, always will. Not one politician can answer the question, how much difference will it make to the climate if we achieve net zero? And I know the answer that's going to come back. If we achieve net zero tomorrow, they would go, OK, brilliant, well done, everyone's done their work, it's cost us a squillion quid to make it happen. When will we know how much of an effect it is? Oh, probably about 100 years. Well, when none of us are here, like one of those kind of notes they put on certain stories where the details can't be released for decades. Is it going to be that? I don't know. This one from Don. Oh, I think I read Don's one, didn't I? I did indeed. This one from Sarah. We could do with the old royal family to sort out our invaders crisis. I would rather my taxes go towards the royal family than illegal invaders, luxury lifestyle, or the BBC. Every family has got a wrong un. Doesn't mean the whole family is wrong. That's true, but does it mean the concept of the royal family is kind of outstayed its welcome? I mean, I don't think it has, personally. Because I can't think of a system that would replace it effortlessly and be any better, really. So it's unconventional, it's a bit weird, you wouldn't invent it tomorrow, but it kind of works. Greg's in Edinburgh on monarchy. Greg, what have you got for us? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. You've just made my point exactly. I always say that the monarchy, the idea of monarchy, is a bit like the bumblebee. It's not supposed to work, but it does.
Yes, is that right? For years they couldn't work out how one flew.
Yeah, and my point is, be careful what you ask for, because I think most people would agree that the last monarch was a pretty good spud. The one before that, King George, was a pretty popular, decent man.
Yeah.
The present king, yeah, he's got his faults, but we know, I think, basically he's a good man with a good heart. And the one that's coming up the road after him, which will probably be after I've long gone, seems to be a fairly decent spud as well. So we know what we've got, we know what we've had, we know what we're coming. So be careful what you want to change.
Careful what you wish for. And I know, people often use France as an example that, once had royalty and is now a republic, and people still visit Versailles and all those palaces all over the place. It does, and they can sort of lay on a bit of a ceremony, not quite as good as ours, but they can kind of do something-ish. That's often used as the example, Greg, isn't it? France can make it work. We could make it work. I don't think it would be any cheaper.
Does it really work? I mean, my point to your producer was that it's all very well saying, yeah, it's more democratic than whoever happens to be the first baby to poke its head out into the world, and that's going to be your head of state, which is pretty bizarre as an idea. But if you think about it, you look around the world at all these presidents, and they all seem to be sort of just political hacks who've been chosen by their establishments. In Ireland at the moment, they're looking for a new president, and do the people really get their choice? No. The choice is two people who have been chosen by two political parties. So you end up, your choice is between a whole load of has-beens and political rejects and insiders. And it's the same. I mean, who gets a real choice so often? Not very many. There's an actual popular vote as to who's going to be your head of state. So, as I say, why change it?
It's a bit weird, isn't it, when you look at America and of all the, I can't remember the population of America, but it's obviously vast. But and they end up with, two people who are. Neither jumps off the page as being the absolute, the Jesus of politics. Out of all those people, they just end up with these weird two. Hillary Clinton being one of them on one occasion and Kamala Harris being another.
And again, in America, your choice is who's got the most money. The two between who's got the most money. not who's the most popular choice.
Yeah.
So is it really democratic?
Is it really democratic? Good point to finish on, Greg. Thank you very much indeed for that. This one comes in from no name given. It's Peter. The royal family should be called the fancy dress mob, and to rub salt into the wounds, we are classed as subjects. Is that still the case? Technically, we are still subjects, I suppose. We are to a degree. Margaret says, get rid of the royal family, outdated, costs a fortune. The king has done nothing for this country. Is it the institution rather than the individual is the point? I mean, it helps if the individual has a certain something, and I suppose, you know, with the Queen, she was there. I mean, there must have been a point when the Queen was, in her 20s, when she became Queen, and people thought, can this young girl really... I mean, especially then, back in the early 50s, that would have, you know, been even more controversial, perhaps. Not that we hadn't had queens before, we'd had loads of them, but you take the point. Is she going to be able to do it like her dad did? Will she be able to do this role properly? So she must have been under that scrutiny, and of course we didn't have 24-hour media back then, so it would have felt, you know, a little different. The discussions on this would have been, you know, very minimal compared to where we are now. So it could be that she was just such a figurehead of this country, such a staple, always there, never wavering, wasn't personally part of, you know, any controversy. I mean, if you look at King Charles, there's a lot of stories around him before he became the king, of course, and none more so than his relationship and his marriage, and then huge high-profile divorce with Princess Diana. But other things there too, you know, the leaked recordings of the conversations he had with Camilla, which I think it was the Mirror that got hold of that. We can argue whether they were sent it by somebody, by the way. So yeah, interesting. But would we benefit from having a republic like I mean, some people look at the United States and go, I wish we were a bit like that. It's more straight to the point. But would it be any better? Would it be any less expensive? The list goes on. 0344 499 1000. It's 3:30.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. We'll go back to more comments from you in a moment. But let's just talk about this story. The 4 masked thieves who've stolen 8 priceless royal jewels from the Louvre in a daylight heist, escaping on scooters after threatening guards. The museum, lacking CCTV in some rooms and with faulty alarms, is now shut as investigators hunt the suspects. President Macron condemned the theft with a major security overhaul already planned. I mean, this was quite extraordinary. It happened in broad daylight, 9:30 in the morning, when a ladder, which was already bolted to the side of the building where they were carrying out works, the thieves just went up the ladder, essentially, broke their way in. They were in there for 7 minutes, nabbed some priceless royal jewels, and then legged it again. I mean, it couldn't have been more simple. It was the sort of thing you'd make a Netflix show of. Let's speak with Daryl Kennedy, former professional burglar. Good afternoon to you, Daryl.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, I mean, you were a clean living boy these days, I should add.
I am for the last 7 years, yes.
Listen, I mean, the reason we thought it was interesting to talk to you is because when that's your life, when you are a professional thief or a burglar or whatever it is this about an easy way to earn a living, or is it about an adrenaline rush?
For me, it was an adrenaline rush. I mean, it was for me for many, many years. I can't speak for everyone else.
Sure. I mean, you had 41 years of targeting the rich and famous, as it were.
I did, yes. I did, yes.
So
especially in Australia.
Was that because you thought there were richer pickings in Australia, or you just happened to be there?
No, in the 80s, Sydney, Australia was a very affluent area with a lot of very wealthy people. So I targeted that as a main thing in my day.
Did it give you a good lifestyle?
Very good, yes, it did.
But you have served time on the inside as a result?
Yeah, I mean, I've only served time in my own country, back in the UK, but the 41 years spanned all over the world. I mean, I was in America, Australia, Canada, most of Europe, but the only time I spent in prison was in my own country, really. That was the only time I ever went to jail.
How long did you do, Daryl, in total?
In total, adding all these sentences up, I did 5 sentences. In total, about 10 years.
Right. I mean, that can't have been fun.
Well, you know, the 4 sentences I had at the start were like 9 months, 12 months. You only do half in the UK, so it was like doing 6 months and getting a tag after 8 weeks. So it was really, really. It didn't mean anything to me, but on my last sentence, when I received 10 years, I had to do 5 years behind the door, which changed my life. I thought, this is it for me, the end.
You're not doing any more?
No more.
You'd robbed 20,000 homes in your criminal career, but you now teach criminology and police students, how to detect criminality.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I'd rather tell people how to protect the homes now and become security conscious, so they can't be victims of crime, rather than be the perpetrator. And that's what I've done for the last 5 years now. I've tried to, change people's ideas that, I'm not just a person who wanted to commit crime all my life. I mean, I got into it because my father was a burglar. He taught me what I knew from an early age, and I did that as a career.
Yeah.
If I could go back and say, would I wish my dad was a plumber, or electrician, or anything other than that, I would have loved that. But my dad was a burglar, so I can't hide away from the fact that he taught me all the tricks of the trade.
Yeah. You never robbed an art gallery, though?
No, I didn't do an art gallery. I'd done a couple of jewellery shops, and bullion dealers, but no, I never did an art gallery. But I've noticed when I go into the art galleries in Manchester, especially the Museum of Art, I always think, well, some of them paintings don't seem that secure to me.
Yeah.
Not that I would ever take a painting, because how do you move a painting? It's like these thieves at the Louvre. I mean, they could have took the Mona Lisa, but they can't sell it.
That's
a piece of
very true.
artwork.
Yeah.
A piece of artwork you can't sell.
Well, I don't know. I'd buy it.
Yeah, you'd buy it, yeah, but only you could see it. Only you'd be able to look at it.
I couldn't tell anybody I bought it. But on a serious point here, Daryl, because I looked at this Does it look to you in Paris like a professional job, or does it look like a couple of chances?
No, an absolute professional job. I'd put 99%. It's also with someone who works at the Louvre as well, is involved in the actual robbery, because, you know, for something like that, they'd have to, I mean, to have no CCTV to look back over, which they should have, because these guys would have gone in there to look at where the jewels were, and then would have planned their escape route by actually being in the Louvre. So they've not just put a ladder up and chose that window to lead them exactly where the jewels are. It's all been planned, pre-planned. So, you know, the police and the security should look at the CCTV cameras, because those guys who have gone through the windows, through the doors, would have gone through the Louvre anyway to look at the jewels.
Yeah,
so with technology now, as long as they've got body mapping, which this, you know, AI does that now, and maps the bodies, they'll be able to pick out which people were in the Louvre to look at them jewels. So I don't think they'll have a problem finding the guys who have done it.
It's interesting, because I thought that initially, you know, I don't know what kind of nutter leaves a ladder on the side of an art gallery, but
exactly.
Unless the person that left the ladder was to do with it, but let's assume they were. But nonetheless, even allowing for the fact that this provided, you know, literally an entrance into one of the most famous art galleries on the planet. The fact that it was that quick, they would have to have known where they were going, wouldn't they? And
absolutely. And that's why I say, I think it was an inside job. You know, there'd be someone who's on the payroll who actually works in the Louvre. I mean, these things just don't occur, and people are just lucky at the time by doing these things. These things are planned. I mean, some of the jobs I did when I was in my heyday, and I knew a certain piece of jewellery which was worth a lot of money.
Sure.
I used to plan my day out by watching the people, where they went, what they did, and then find the days that they weren't wearing that jewel to know that it was still in the property that I was going to turn over after that. So it's a lot of planning.
Even though you've turned your life around, Daryl, you're no longer a thief or a burglar. You do the very opposite to that now. Is there part of you, is it sort of in your DNA, that looked at that Paris job and thought, wow, that's impressive?
No, not really, no. No, it doesn't impress me.
Those days are gone.
It's like a lot of friends of mine in the game who are still at it, who I do see now and again. They say to me, did I wish I was on the Hatton Gardens heist?
Yeah.
Not really, no, not really, no, because, you know, they were all my age. They're in the 60s.
Yeah.
You know, it's time to call it a day. You can't carry on thinking you're this super criminal, you know. If you want to spend time behind bars, just carry on doing what you're doing, because you will go behind bars.
That's exactly what happened to that lot as well, of course.
Absolutely.
Daryl, okay, thank you for being with us. Appreciate your time, sir. Daryl Kennedy, he's a former professional burglar. 41 years targeting the rich and famous, 20,000 homes. And in the last 7 years, I think he said, he now teaches criminology and talks to police students to help prevent future crimes, which I suppose, notwithstanding how we tend to feel about people that do this for a living, the only thing you can ask of a criminal is they stop becoming a criminal. And if they can turn it around to something more positive, I don't think you get an OBE for that, having said that. But that was Daryl. This is Will Geddes. He's a security expert. Will, good afternoon to you. Always good to get your views on these things. I mean, the first thing that jumps out about this Paris Louvre story is the ladder, right? I mean, you look at that and go, a bloody ladder was left out. I mean, that's all shades of extraordinary.
Yeah, there's a number of components here. I mean, I was listening intently to Daryl, as I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers were as well, getting the criminal side. And obviously I work on the other side of the fence. Yeah. And one of the things that we look at, certainly when we're looking to protect facilities like this, or museums, for example, and I've done a little bit of work with museums, Daryl, Ian, is that it's how easy you're affording access to the criminal. How can they get, without detection or without being impeded, from the external parts of the building all the way through to where the precious jewels are being held. And in this instance, 7 minutes doesn't sound like an awful lot, but it is quite a bit of time for them to have made this incursion. But there were a number of factors which are very curious, as Daryl made mention to there potentially being an inside job. One of the things that really concerns me, Ian, is the fact that there were 3 rooms that did not have any effective CCTV.
And that's extraordinary in itself. You'd have thought, I've been to the Louvre a couple of times, and, you know, it's like a lot of art galleries. I go in there with the best intentions. I have to say, about a third of the way round, I'm kind of a little bit done. But nonetheless, I understand its significance, and the Mona Lisa is always a bit of a moment, or isn't it smaller than we thought? You know, all of that, Venus de Milo, all of that kind of stuff is impressive. But the fact that these people were able to pinpoint what they wanted at breathtaking speed clearly suggests they knew the terrain. They knew where they were going.
Yeah, absolutely. They'd done their advanced reconnaissance, as any good burglar or good thief is going to do. They're going to have a look at the property. They're going to look at their points of access. Where is the most vulnerable point on the building? How will they defeat any security that they can identify? And maybe since the days when Daryl was a fully sort of firing operator doing his thing, technology has come a long way even in the last 7 years. And any security that is going to be effective has to be dual layered. It's got to be layered on an overt sense, Ian, so people can see it, and it acts as a deterrent. And then you've got the more covert layer, which is the undetectable, the unseen security, which is there to warn you as the security of that facility that they've breached your security. And if you think of it like a fried egg, you look at the white, the outside of the egg, and the yolk in the middle. It's when they breach that first bit of the white before they even get to the yellow, you should be rallying your response accordingly and locking it down.
Yeah, and they were off on their scooters before anybody could say bonjour, monsieur.
Well, yeah, which was really sensible. I mean, a lot of people think that these sort of raids will take place in the dead of night. To do it during the day is audacious, although they were all masked up from what we understand. But to escape on scooters during probably the still heights of rush hour and commuter time in Paris via scooters is going to be a very effective way of evading the police, or the police, if they had responded, trying to capture them.
And of course, you can't shoot a burglar if they're not armed and not showing you any kind of threat. So the police wouldn't have been able to just fire at them if they'd, you know, seen them. They could only have, you know, attempted to possibly, you know, threaten them. But even that option, it never came to that option because they weren't there quick enough.
Absolutely. And I mean, and again, yes, that would be a very difficult position for even the hardest gendarme to defend if he shot a burglar in the back. But I mean, my gut feeling is it was certainly a robbery to order. I think someone was looking for these items. But as I was mentioning to someone earlier today, Ian, if you look at the Graffs, the Cartiers, the Van Cleefs, who have obviously very, very high value gems within their stores. The sad thing is, Ian, and I did a survey some years back on the major museums here in London to see what their security was like. And their security, even here in the UK, is not as good as it should be, not in my estimation. And you look at these jewelry stores, their security is far more advanced than you'll find in most museums, including here in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that you don't tend to think of, and obviously there's certain museums that, you know, would need obvious protection, works of art and jewellery and things like that. You know, the History Museum and, you know, you don't think of somebody nicking a Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton and getting away with it. I mean, that would be a cumbersome, be bone by bone, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I had one of the museums, which again, I did this review for the Daily Telegraph through a lovely journalist called Dalia Arberge, who was the art critic, who asked me to do this. And we went back to these museums afterwards, before it went to press, to say these were the findings of my survey. I'm willing to sit down with you free of charge, see what I can suggest, what you could potentially consider within your security. Now, some turned around and said, yes, that would be great. Thank you, Will. There was one particular museum, I won't name and shame, who turned around and said, no, we're not interested in what this guy has to say.
Wow.
And a few weeks later had a very major robbery.
No. There you go. There's a point when you must have sort of slightly smiled to yourself, for all the right reasons, of course, Will. Thank you as ever, Will Geddes, security expert. Not much he doesn't know about that line of work. Thank you to him and our previous guest too. 0344 499 1000. Jeremy Carl's on the other side of the news. We'll chat to Jezza shortly to find out what's going on, and of course more comment coming in from you too. This is Talk.
There is an organisation called the Centre for Media Monitoring, which grew out of the Muslim Council of Britain, and it is there supposedly to monitor the media and to identify examples of alleged Islamophobia in reporting. And they've claimed things like the news reports that Salman Abedi, who attacked the Manchester Arena, chanted Islamic slogans before detonating his device, that those reports were Islamophobic for saying that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
10 to 4. Deanne says we should tip off the French police and say we've heard that the jury is on its way over to Britain. They might stop a few boats there. That's a great point. Yes, it's been divided up between 30 dinghies. Better stop them all just in case. Martin says, did the master burglar leave a velvet glove at the scene of the crime, teasing the detectives with their deviousness? They missed a trick if they didn't. Crims have no class these days. All the best, says Martin. Interesting. Brad in Cambridge. Personally, the thing I like most about having a royal family is the stability and the continuity of the institution. There was a really good point that Dead as a Dodo posted. It was clearly an AI question he asked, but it does brilliantly sum up something that we probably all knew but didn't have it in these terms. A monarchist supports the institution of monarchy as a system of government, while a royalist specifically supports a particular monarch or royal family. That's a really good divide, because if you look at monarchy being part of a system of government, it kind of I think it becomes a little more digestible to understand it or even justify it if that's your position. As distinct from a royalist who just likes to collect kind of tea towels with Prince Harry's face on it or something. Mark's in Lincolnshire. On this point, Mark, what are you thinking? Afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian. How are you doing, mate?
I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, not bad.
Jolly good. Yeah, it's just... I was very much a monarchist. Charles has changed my opinion on the whole thing. Just purely because I'm also quite a devout Christian, and I don't think he's doing that job anywhere near as well as he should do. His association with Islam seems to be, well, suspicious, shall we say.
Is he doing that? Because was he the guy that was it Charles that changed the defender of the faith to defender of all faiths or something? Was that Prince Charles?
Yeah, I think that's what he wanted to do, but I don't think he actually did it in the end.
Right. Okay.
But I know it's what he wants to do. I mean, there's all these conspiracies anyway about whether he's converted to Islam. I don't know.
I very much doubt
any
that.
Truth in that. Yeah, I would suspect that's probably not the case, but. You know, you can't be defender. I know for a fact he definitely does believe in all that defender of the faiths thing. Well, you can't do that because he's supposed to be head of the Church of England. You know,
is the Church of England still allowed to kind of defend the rights of other faiths? So you're not allowed to do that? I mean, if you spoke to a good rabbi or imam, they would say that they would also defend the rights of other faiths, wouldn't they?
It depends which angle you're really looking at it from, to be honest with you, Ian. Essentially, if you boil it down in faith-based things, you know, if you want to talk about Islam, I mean, Islam's the one that wants to persecute the Jews and the Christians, and let alone non-believers. They're the lowest of the low. You know, technically speaking, you know, certainly from my position anyway as a Christian, he shouldn't. I mean... There is only one faith, Christianity. It's faith in Christ. That's the only thing he should ever do. He should promote that. The Church of England should promote that. That's literally their job, basically. Because if you go into, you know, if you want to get a bit more technical about it, if you go into Scripture and things, you know, Christ literally tells us, you know, the prophets will come and people that say claiming to speak from God, but they're not.
Yeah.
You know, so if you want to go down that angle and you're going to say, well, yeah, okay, all these other faiths are all equally valid and stuff, well, then you're going literally against what Christ taught you. You know, so... You know,
so I mean, that's if you're a Christian, of course. I mean, if you are kind of either neutral or of another faith.
That's if you're a Christian, but what I'm talking about with that is from Charles's perspective, he's supposed to be the head of that. So he has to walk a very fine line, doesn't he, really?
Yeah.
Like, I can appreciate his position where he sits as head of the nation as such. That he has to kind of be a bit more welcoming to others, I guess. However, on an equal point, you know, I'm a 90-10 split ethno-nationalist. So, as far as I'm concerned, there's only really one priority in the country. You know, so it's always a complex one.
And different people, and I'm sure there are other Christians, Mark, who would share your view, and there'd be others who would say, no, you don't have to, you can do it this way, etc. You take my point. Listen, Mark, I've got to move. Great call, though. You get the last word on this. Mark in Lincolnshire. And Tim says, abolishing the royal family, 2 points. Firstly, the tourist revenue created by the royal family is huge. Secondly, every anti-monarchist has a different view on how it should be replaced, which, if we tried, would lead to never-ending mayhem. So, as imperfect as it is, leave the royal family alone.
Absolutely. Pay for my education. Fine, upstanding bunch of people, apart from that idiot who should be...
Pay for your education? Oh, yeah, because you're...
Banished abroad. That's what I do with him. You wait for his wife, his ex-wife, to turn on him to make a few quid. Sorry, I'm breathless. I've been in Paris all weekend. I can't say too much. Oh,
yeah,
there we go.
How's that ladder?
What? Oh, dear me. I thought the high-vis thing was a bit of a joke. How can you wear... Honest to God. Honest, if I could tell you the best story I've ever heard about burglary, but I can't because I'll be fired.
Really?
Oh, well, there we go. No, I'm not going to tell you, but it's a very great story. I'll tell you off air.
OK.
But, yeah, the Louvre. I mean, how can you sell that stuff? Can you sell that stuff, or do you break it down?
As we were saying before, there's certainly, like, you can't sell the Mona Lisa. You couldn't, or the Venus de Milo.
The what? Let's cut to the chase and talk about things that really matter.
That
Okay,
thing
there's
with
two
no
things we
arms.
need to talk about. The first is, how much will you bet me there'll be a hosepipe ban by January, despite the fact that you might as well live in a lake today? But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, I just caught the voice of the nation, Ian Collins, in the men's toilets, didn't I? Do you want to tell them what you were doing?
I was in the men's toilets.
Over there.
I was in the male toilets, and Jeremy came in. It was an act that is perfectly legal.
Not in public.
You think?
Yeah.
I mean,
you
it's
were
not-
rubbing very aggressively.
Well, I had to because there was no way round it. Because there was so much to, get off.
Yeah, and I said, are you going to get off all of it? Are you going to get all of it off by rubbing that hard? And he said, yes, I have to do it because I don't like to go out looking like this in public.
Yeah. Makeup removal, kids.
Makeup removal, ladies and
That's what we're dealing with
The
here.
man who was rubbing his face aggressively, saying, I don't want to be on the train, looking like I've got makeup on.
Oh, I've done it before. When you go home and you jump on the train, you go, I didn't rub the old makeup off the face. And people do... I mean, I know...
lower the mirror in the private car and wipe it off.
In the... yeah, well, I've got a carriage, but let's not go there.
No.
But nonetheless, in London, people don't care if a bloke's got makeup on.
not
But I
at all.
care.
Do you?
Yeah, I don't want to be out in public
Oh,
with makeup
that's
on my
quite
face.
sweet. That
Well,
was
it's a bit
quite
weird, isn't it?
That was a bit vulnerable.
I care.
What's work today? I mean, we could talk about Andrew till the cows come home. My parents lived in a